Good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks for waiting. We appreciate your patience. Okay. Octavia, everyone is here?
I have not yet identified Councilwoman Griffin, but I do have two phones here, but I'm not sure if either are her.
You want to get started and she'll come in?
Okay.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the meeting to order. At this time, City Clerk Pittman, would you call the roll?
Councilman Fry,
Here.
Councilwoman Griffin is absent. Councilwoman Burrow,
Octavia, if you call my name, you are going out every time you call somebody's name. So whether you call my name or not here.
okay. Let me get closer to my microphone. Councilwoman Robinette.
Here.
Mayor Jones.
Here.
Councilwoman Lipka.
Here.
Councilman Garrett.
Here.
Is that better? Can you hear me better? Okay.
Okay, a quorum is present. At this time, we have our new business and interim city manager, Jeff Bloom. Would you please take over the CIP meeting, please?
Yes, I will. Thank you very much, Mayor, and good evening, Mayor and Council. Want to remind everybody that we are here for the 5-year capital improvement program report, and this is the work session that gives us the opportunity to explain everything that's in the CIP, what we've changed. As usual, you know, we go through this exercise every year, and it's really more than just an exercise, it's an evaluation. We take a fresh look at all of the assets of the city to determine if we are correctly planning for the future with respect to our capital assets. And a lot of times what you'll see is new things get added that weren't there last year and we need to do them right away. Sometimes we can push them off to the future. We change the timing of things. We either push them forward or push them back. And as I said, we go through this every year. A couple of quickies before I turn this over to Lexi. And the first is one of the things that I think has finally arrived is we are at that point where our needs, not our wants, but our needs exceed our resources. And I think if you step back and think about it in these terms, in any given year, we're spending between $175,000 and $200,000 on police department related assets. Same period, we're spending between $300,000 and $500,000 on fire department, and that's impacted by mostly by the equipment costs, because we amortize about $200,000 a year on equipment costs. And then common fleet costs us $200,000 to $300,000. And those are the big areas, if you will, and then there's everything else. And you add those up, you're between $675,000 and $1 million, $675,000 and $1 million. You look at that in terms of we collect $1.2 million in sales taxes. So that leaves an excess of between $525,000 and $200,000. The thing that has happened to us is the debt service on COP Series 13 has exacerbated this problem over time. And you might recall, for those of us who were here, back when COP Series 13 debt service was first started, it was being paid for by the general fund. In 2017, when the general fund couldn't afford it anymore, we switched that over to the capital fund. And so that's an extra $340,000. So in a good year, we have $185,000 left over after those 3 big areas in debt service. In a bad year, we're $140,000 short. This is a bad year. So that's an issue that we have to begin dealing with. The second item, speaking of debt service, I wanted to remind everybody of is, again, it's that COPS 13 debt service that we spend approximately 40% of that, or $260,000 a year on debt service that's paid for by the downtown TIF. And that downtown TIF is going away in 2023. And right now we don't have a revenue source to make that part of the debt service. We'll continue looking for that and we'll report back, but I did want to remind everybody, and I see Councilwoman Robinette shaking her head, so thank you very much for that. Means you've heard the last 300 times I've already said this. and thank you, Councilwoman Lipka, as well. But seriously, I'm sorry that I sound like a broken record, but it's just that important, and we'll continue to work on it. So those are my my things to say beforehand. I'll turn it over to Lexi and let her talk about this CIP tonight. Lexi, if you would, please.
Thank you, Council, Mayor, City Manager, for letting me present this tonight. Octavia, I think I'm going to share my screen, so tell me if it works.
While you're sharing your screen, you're very quiet as well.
Right. Can you increase your volume?
I'm going to try. There we go. Okay, can you hear me now?
It's about the same.
Oh, okay.
Are you using an internal mic on your system or an external mic?
I think I'm using the external mic on my system. I'm using like the little camera thing.
Yeah, it just sounds like it's either muffled, like something's on top of it, or you're very far away, one of the two. I don't know.
All right, hold on. I'm going to switch to going in by phone. That way you should be able to hear me better. Give me just a second.
Thank you.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting.
I have a dog sleeping in my office, snoring and growling in its sleep. It is very weird. Now it's awake.
And now he's not.
He's not snoring anymore.
Hush!
Okay, can you all hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll hear you better when Linda mutes.
Okay. I do apologize for the technical difficulties there. Okay, so thank you all for being here tonight to go over the capital improvement, 5-year capital improvement project. It's a requirement that we do every year per our charter. What we'll do tonight is go over the 5-year projection, and then it will be created, and then that will actually be approved when we approve the budget in June. So this will be finalized, and then it's on hold, and it's not actually passed until June when we pass the next year's budget. So the first thing I'm going to kind of go over how this is going to work. We're going to start by reviewing the pro forma, which is this form right here, which basically shows our revenues, our expenses, and how that affects our fund balance. Then we will go into the very colorful spreadsheet that Jeff created many moons ago. And that's where we'll go into the more project detail. So if you all are able to follow along with me, I believe this is maybe page 3 of the work session binder. The pro forma here, as you can see, it starts for this current fiscal year, which is fiscal year 2021, and it'll go through fiscal year 2026. We're showing our projected revenues for fiscal year 2021 as $1,219,000, and then we're projecting grant and other revenue of about $115,000. So that gives us a total revenue for this fiscal year anticipated of about $1.3 million. We're anticipating total asset purchases as well as debt service payments of about $1,198,000, which means that we are going to spend about $136,000 less than what we're actually bringing in revenue. That's a good thing. We always want to spend less than we bring in revenue. Here's where the kicker is. We will bring in $48,000 of funds from the economic development sales tax. Those $48,000 are the 20% match that we're required to make for any of our STP projects, which are the surface transportation projects, which are all of our street repairs, those big projects we do. We just finished January Powell Brotherton. We're starting to work on Frost, Florissant, and South State. You'll see in a few minutes. Then we have this negative number of $342,000, and that is our transfer out for our COPs, or our certificates of participation, and that is what Jeff had just alluded to, which is the certificate of participation payment that we have to make every year for the police department. So when you factor those two items in, we're actually having a net change in fund balance of $158,000. So that means we're going to dip into fund balance about $158,000. That's not a good thing, especially when we don't have a really big fund balance. And as you can see, it's kind of odd to start off the year with a negative fund balance. We are showing a negative fund balance of $636,000. And I believe you all were, or at least the members that were on the council last year for the audit presentation, will remember that when the auditor did his presentation of the financials for the city, one of the items that he mentioned was an issue with our surface transportation project request for reimbursement. And so we were not submitting request for reimbursement to MoDOT for the surface transportation project. So the street projects were not being, the funds were not being requested in a timely manner, which meant that we weren't receiving them in a timely manner. And so because the public works director didn't get those in and then get those funds in, they had to become what is referred to as deferred revenue. So we weren't able to accrue those revenues and say that they're going to come in during the fiscal year 20. We said it was too late. They said it has to be deferred revenue, and so it's going to be counted as revenue this year, not revenue last year, which is why we're showing a negative fund balance. So in those grant reimbursements, the amount of money that became deferred revenue was about $422,000. So that's not the full $636,000, but that money is coming back this year. So at the end of this fiscal year, that $636,000 negative would actually be not so high because of that $422,000 that's showing as revenue for this year. The other remaining amount of money is actually due to the surface transportation project funds still. Those grants are generally funded as an 80-20. So we have to do a 20% match, 80% is paid by MoDOT. That 20% match may be funded by the Economic Development Sales Tax Fund, which I had mentioned up here, which was the $48,000 that we're collecting this fiscal year. We budget that at 20% because that is how the grant is written. It appears that the January Powell Brotherton program was only funded at as a reimbursement of 68.78%. and that was because the cost of the project were higher when it was actually bid out than what the grant was written for. So they would only reimburse us at 68.78% of expenses, which isn't really a problem, except for since we weren't notified, we've never adjusted our economic development sales tax transfer for this current fiscal year to reflect that it was going to be a higher number. So we need to actually do that transfer to make up the difference between the 20%, the 80% reimbursement to the 68.78 reimbursement. So that's a big chunk of that differential. And the other item is we did have some overages. January Powell Brotherton had some pretty high overages, as did Highmont. Had about $28,000 that it went over budget that was not reimbursed. So between the increased funds from EDST for the percentage of reimbursement or match that the city's required, as well as the overruns, that makes up about $244,000. So that creates us with actually a positive beginning fiscal year balance of $31,000. So we do have a fund balance. When this year gets audited, we will show that we started capital funds will have a positive fund balance because we had all that revenue that came in this year. But it's only going to be $31,000. We have thoroughly depleted our capital improvement sales tax fund balance. So what we need to do is, yes?
So can I stop you right there? So where does the 31,000 show up on the pro forma?
It does not.
Okay. All of this that you just got done telling us all about, is there a memo on this? Is there an addendum to this CIP document that's kind of covers all this?
There isn't currently. I can create something, a memo for you all just for your reference, but there is not one currently. The issue is the pro forma is done based on the financial statements for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2020. And that's where we're showing as of June 30th, 2020. Until it's audited and we are able to transfer in all the deferred revenue, that's why we're showing the way we are. So our audit hasn't happened yet. If we waited a couple weeks, maybe we would have had some different numbers from our audit.
So basically what you're saying is you have to go with the numbers you know, even though you're aware of the numbers that are going to change all of this, you cannot reflect that in the paperwork. Okay, so for me, because I need to be able to follow the bouncing ball, can you create a memo and break this all down in a memo for us so that I can attach this to the CIP information that I maintain, and then when the bouncing ball falls into place, I can compare the notes and make sure everything laid out the way we said it would?
Absolutely. And we figured we probably need to do something like that, just because trying to, I guess, put all this into perspective today, I was like, this is going to be kind of confusing. So I was trying to talk slowly, at least this time, so that maybe people could kind of follow a little bit. I know I have a tendency to speak quickly, so, but I will send all of that out in a memo tomorrow morning. So,
Thank you.
But so basically, the issue is we are going to wind up with a positive balance here. The 636 negative will become a $31,000 positive. But the biggest issue that the city has to face at this point is that this yellow line where it says net change in fund balance, every year we're spending more than what we're bringing in. So we're going to have to figure out how we fix that. And every year there's something, and what it actually is, I don't know, but that's where we're gonna discuss. But this is an issue. We cannot always be going negative, especially when we have no fund balance. So again, every year it's the same process. We estimate an increase in sales taxes because we don't know what it's going to be, but we estimate that our sales tax revenue will go up about 2% every fiscal year. And that's our best guess by inflation and consumer price index elevation. So that's what we're going to go with. And then we have what our projected expenses are. We know what our debt service is projected to be. And so then we can also use that information to determine what our parks transfers, our transfers from economic development sales tax, as well as our transfers out for COPS for debt service as well. So as you can see, it's kind of lopsided. It goes pretty deep, but and it gets pretty bad. But even if we just leave everything as is, we don't change anything, except for just realizing the revenue that we're going to realize this year. If we keep all the expenses as they are, we're still going to be a negative $1,212,000 at the end of year 2026. So regardless, we have to make changes in here. The other fund that is involved in the capital improvement program and this endeavor is the Parks Fund. The Parks Fund, again, has revenues that are estimated for this fiscal year of about $1.3 million. We're anticipating having grant revenue of about $609,000. And then we have these net transfers out, which are about $889,000. That gives us a total available funds to spend of about $1,072,000. We have assets that we're spending of about $937,000, and we're spending about $223,000 for debt service, which is for the pool. So that gives us, again, this year a negative change in fund balance of $87,000. The issue is for parks is that this $223,000 goes away after next year. So we have to pay the $223,000 in debt service this year. We pay $223,000 in debt service next year. And then we can increase into our fund balance in a big way. We're going to anticipate putting $530,000 into the fund balance in 2023, almost another $500,000 in 2025 and 2026. So that is a good thing. That'll give us about $2.2 million in fund balance, which would be able to give us the ability to do some improvements and items in our parks that we all have been discussing that we need to do. So that is the one benefit there. Again, we are looking at a negative net change for this fiscal year, but after that, we're going in a positive direction. So that's a much better outlook for the Parks Fund for capital improvement projects.
So basically, we're looking at between 2022 and 2026, we're going to be a great city of parks, but we won't be able to pay our bills otherwise.
Well,
only with respect to our capital fund, Councilwoman.
Yeah. And this is just our capital fund, and we just have to figure out what our needs are and what needs we can push back, and that's kind of where we're at this point. And how long we can continue to push certain needs back. Is there any other questions about this pro forma or anything that anybody else wanted to explain a little better? If there aren't any questions, I was going to move on to the very colorful spreadsheet that Jeff has created.
Lexi, before you get started, I just want to remind everybody that what you just went through, the capital improvement sales tax and then the parks fund, that's where the money comes from, and it's broken down in the later spreadsheet. So you can't just take money out of the parks fund to pay for something that's a capital improvement, otherwise. And I think they're all marked, but I just wanted to let some of our newer folks help them understand that you can't switch between them. So that was a little confusing when I started. I'm just helping out.
Oh, thank you. Yes, and that is true that we have certain items that are for the Parks Fund, and Parks Fund Parks capital improvement can only be used for parks. And then the capital improvement sales tax fund, that can be used for anything, but parks can only be used for parks. And so having this excess down here in parks is not going to help us with this $344,000 debt payment that we're going to be looking at once downtown TIF goes away. Okay, so I'm going to try to make this bigger so y'all can see it. Is that better? So this is a very colorful spreadsheet that we have that tries to explain and break down all of the different projects that we have, what the cost is, if they're grant related or not, how they're funded, and if it's a new project, if it's a grant funded project, if it's a placeholder item, or if it's just something about it's changing, whether we're pushing it back a year, we're putting it forward a year, we're changing the actual dollar amount. It could be any number of different reasons why it's been changed to a yellow color. Again, we always budget during the fiscal year for this current fiscal year, which we just did in June. Sometimes there are changes to the forecast, and so if there are any changes, those will be discussed as we move forward. There are a couple of notes that I did want to bring up because there were a couple of things that in an effort to try to separate out this into nice even pages, we missed a couple of, or I missed a couple of lines here. If you look at line 118, where it says the half-ton dump truck with plow number 77, underneath that should be 2 more lines. If you look for 2025, this does not equal $295,000, missing about $40,000. That is $40,000 for code enforcement vehicles that is a project that is to be discussed as well. And so that's all for that year. And then in 2026, there's another $40,000 for those code enforcement vehicles, as well as $160,000 for a 2.5-ton dump truck with a plow. And I do apologize because those 2 lines are missing, but the numbers here are correct. It's just the detail here isn't there. But the sheets are included in your packet. So if you go through, you will see those sheets. The only other thing of note was that also within the common fleet, where is it? Right here, number 115, item number 115, it's a pickup truck, half-ton, unit number 8, and it's for $35,000 for fiscal year 2022. That was actually moved to the first page under parks vehicles. It's line number 34. And so that actually gives us an additional $35,000 less in expense for fiscal year 2023, because it's listed in both parks and in common fleet. And we were able to move that to parks because it is truly a parks maintenance vehicle for the majority of its use.
Lexi, will
so
you
I do apologize. Yes?
I apologize. Will you be sending us a corrected version or with these corrections?
Absolutely. I'll send it with the memo that I sent regarding the change in fund balance. I didn't want to send it out right before the meeting in case it confused people for seeing, for looking at it and somebody had the new one, somebody had the old one, and then they weren't seeing the same documents. And so I figured I would just send that out after the meeting so that way everybody could see it.
Is there any way to make it bigger for us blind people?
As big as the screen.
No, I mean when you print it, when you send it out tomorrow.
Oh. I would think so. I will see what I can do. It is very hard to see. I have to keep on making it larger for myself. So I don't know how Jeff can see it, but apparently he can. And I think he's the only one who can read it easily.
Councilwoman Lipgott, landscape, it helps some.
Okay.
And quick question, Lexi. So CIP detail page 66, that would go away. It's moved to 22.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so just as a refresher for Councilman Garrett and Councilman Fry, I don't remember if you were here last year for the CIP or not. This brown kind of color or tan color is a placeholder. It's something that we know we need to do. And so we always put anything that we know we need to do and we want to keep it on our back burner, we always put that in a tan color. Orange means that it is grant, and so it means it's grant funded or partially grant funded. If it is a grant, it will have the percentage of what it's going to be funded right here. Blue means it's new, so any new projects would be in this light blue color. And again, as I said, yellow would mean that it has changed either from one year to the next or the dollar amount has gone up. The first two sections are all the parks funds and the money that the parks money that is able to be spent. The rest of it is just the capital improvement sales tax fund. And if everyone is okay with all the information so far, I just want to remind all the department heads that are going to be presenting their items that we're only talking about items that have changed or that are new projects. Anything that's still out there from last year or the year before that, we really don't discuss because they've been out there. That's the information that's already been discussed and approved by the council prior. So generally we don't discuss those unless council has any questions about those items. So if there are no other questions, I will turn it over to Director of Parks, Dave Musgrave, to start with the Parks facilities information.
Thank you, Lexi. Good evening, Mayor Jones, Council. I'm going to point out the pool ultraviolet system. It is a placeholder, so we did move it back to 2026.
Which system?
The pool ultraviolet system.
Okay.
It's something that the county is going to require of all aquatic facilities at some points, and that's why it's left in our budget, but it was pushed back 1 year to 2026 because they do not require it yet. So that's a pretty easy one. The next one that we're going to talk about is the Community Center Art Gallery Conference Room. And the Community Center Conference Room, basically the art gallery we have in the Community Center.
Mike Ernest. I'm doing good. Who's this?
Somebody's on here.
Can we mute that?
I'll continue. It's moved to 2023, and that basically is going to give us a dedicated conference room for boards and commissions meetings, smaller groups, that sort of thing. The problem we've run into is when we have several meetings in the building, whether it's evenings, weekends, that sort of thing, it's taken away from our rental rooms. So we'd like to have a dedicated room that is for meetings and conferences and that sort of thing. So that's what you see there, the $25,000 in 2023. The next thing.
So I'm going to stop you real quick.
Yeah.
So you're saying that this particular project, I know we've discussed it before and we voted it down in the past. So you're pushing this out to 2023. So basically you're putting a placeholder on this?
Correct.
And then what about the lower parking lot, Hudson Park? It shows here that you're pushing that out to 24?
Correct.
Okay. Is that something that needs to be moved up though?
I'm looking right now. I'm sorry.
And does that parking have, I guess it would have no bearing
Hudson
on the
parking lot didn't get moved. It stayed the same year it was the year previous. It's
okay.
At 76 for 24-25.
Okay.
And that actually isn't a repave or anything. That's a new parking lot on the lower level of Hudson. If you're familiar with Hudson Park, it's got the two pavilions,
right,
upper and lower. It would actually be a parking lot in that lower green space, so that the lower pavilion would have better access for people who are renting it. Because right now they have to walk quite a distance from the parking lot to get down there.
Yeah, it's a pain.
It very much is.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, the next change is going to be the West Florissant Community Park. That was a grant that we received when Doug Wigg was director. You'll see that it's changed in the forecast. I'll be honest, I was going through CIP this year and I noticed it was budgeted at 175. I honestly don't know why the previous public works director budgeted at that, because we were awarded $462,000 for that grant. So that's why you see the change. It's actually the dollar amount for the grant that we were already awarded for that project. The next change you're going to see is going to be the Plaza at 501 Farmers Market. Push that back 1 year. Primarily because the project at Forestwood Park is going to end up taking 2 years, and I'll get to that in the lower levels as well. But short of it, basically the tennis courts are going to end up costing more money than we're allowed to apply for the grant, so we had to split that into 2 phases, and I'll get down to that here in a minute. The next change is going to be the community center gymnasium roof replacement. Push that back 1 year. primarily because we had the community center main roof, the flat roof, repaired last year. They went ahead and patched the roof on the gymnasium so it's not leaking currently. So we're able to push that back a year, basically to help us with our fund balance in the long run. The next one you're going to see a change is the Forest Wood Ball Field renovation phase 2, and that's an added project. So to get down into it, Forest Wood has a lot of things that need repaired, fixed, replaced, that sort of thing. As I mentioned, the tennis court project came in higher than we thought it would. To redo all 8 tennis courts at Forest Wood Park was going to be $575,000 to $600,000. So we decided to split that in 2 phases because we actually have 2 banks of tennis courts there. So this year we applied to do 4 of them through the Parks Municipal Grants, along with the playground at Forest Wood Park, for a total of $475,000. And that was up there that we already budgeted for this previous year. Next year, we'll apply to do the 2nd bank of tennis courts, along with all of the field lighting there at Forest Wood Park, which will be another $475,000. And that's what you see there under the Forest Wood Ball Field renovation phase 2. The next 2 lines you see are changes, Park Municipal Grant 2025 and 2026. The reason I've left those completely blank and just a description is because we're getting ready to do our park master plan revamp. It's out for bid right now. We're hoping to get that done here in the next 6 months to a year, depending how long it takes with COVID and all the things we're dealing with right now. I didn't want to just dedicate projects that I think need fixed or that my staff needs fixed. I want to get input from the community and from Ferguson when we do our park master plan, and then we'll have a better idea of what grants we need to apply for in 25 and 26. So that's why those are just in there kind of general. The next one is going to be the community center AV upgrades. We've talked about this in the past. We pulled it off because funds were short, those sort of things, but it is something that we do need to address. Our event space here does not have a dedicated AV system. Anytime we try to use it for a large event, whether it's a meeting, a town hall, anything like that, we're pulling in portable sound systems or renting sound systems. So that's something we do need to address down the road, and we put it in there for 2025. The next one is going to be our uniform park signs. That's
Dave,
yes.
Is there any possibility of moving that AV system up sooner? Because with the, I mean, it is something that's definitely needed. And if there's any possibility of moving it into 2021, 20 to 21 or 21 to 22, it's only going to enhance the rental possibilities and attractiveness. And it's also, if you get a very good sound system in there, you're going to be able to raise the rates if you wanted to. So is there any possibility of moving that up the timeline?
There's always an opportunity to move it forward. I could see us doing it in 22 or 23, potentially. You guys saw the pro forma. There are dollars there to spend, but that's something that you guys could talk about and we can move as we need to.
Or if you could consider that in your master plan.
Definitely. Okay. The next one's going to be uniform park signs. That's something that if you've been to our parks, all the signs are different. There's damage to them. It's the first thing you see when you come to our parks, any park, is the sign. So I think it's something that would give a facelift to all of our parks, as well as more curb appeal. So we'd like to go with uniform park signs. To do all of our parks, it's going to be about $60,000. We have that in 2022, so we can hopefully address those next summer. Any questions about the park facilities? All right, moving on. Park vehicles. The first one Lexi already mentioned. It's going to be pickup truck unit number 8. That truck is a truck that's used to haul mowers, trimmers, all those lovely things. Talking to Steve and talking to the garage, it was a truck that should be in the Parks Fund and not in the general fleet. So we moved it over to Parks, and that's why it's there. Next one's going to be an added item, and that's going to be a zero-turn mower, and that's going to be in 2026 in the amount of $12,000. One after that's going to be our tractor with an arm mower. We have one. It is doing decent right now, but it is going to need replaced. So we went ahead and added it to 2026 as well in the amount of $125. Next item is going to be the stump grinder, number 61. That was forecasted to be replaced this year, 20 to 21, but because of everything we were dealing with, we pushed it back a year. So it is in the 2022 for $30,000. Next one after that is going to be our boom truck, unit number 59. The boom truck was originally in the CIP for 22-23. We pushed that back 1 year, primarily because of the garage and everybody over there maintenance-wise, so that it could be pushed back 1 year. That's everything I have for parks vehicles. Do we have any questions about any of those items as well?
So you ended with the boom truck, you said?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So this is Fran. So what if, I mean, we're technically speaking, we're planning 5 years in advance. You know, what happens? Do we have our own street sweepers?
Yes, we do. We have a street sweeping vehicle. That would not be in parks, though. That would actually be in our general fleet.
Okay. Okay, because that's something that, you know, I hear the community talk about all the time. And, you know, if we're planning stuff 5 years in advance, I'm just wondering, and maybe, you know, that's something, a conversation for the council as well, to see, you know, if that's something that would be worth investing in. I would love to hear, you know, anybody's opinion on that. And I mean, this would be the opportunity if we're talking about, you know, planning 5 years in advance or even 10 years in advance. I'm just wondering if that would be something that the council would be interested in increasing the investing in, so we can take care of our own streets.
And we do have a street sweeper. It's in good working order. The problem we have right now is manpower to put in that street sweeper.
Yeah, that too. And so if we're talking about like 5 years in advance, and that's how we plan, then I'm just wondering, I'm just curious to know what the council thinks.
I think that's probably a budget. Am I on?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Fran, that's probably a conversation for the budget. This is just an opportunity right now for us to listen to what the department's wish list is.
When you say the budget,
this is not the budget.
She's referring to the budget work session process in May and June.
yeah, but that's for the following year, correct, Jeffrey?
It is.
That for,
It would be for fiscal 22.
right. And so I think it would be appropriate to have this conversation if we're talking about, you know, at the most we plan a year in advance, then we do the 5 years in advance. So, you know, I'm just saying there's, you know, that we have a certain way, but if we as a community want to be able to invest in some stuff, I think this would be the appropriate setting. I just want to know what the council thinks. That's all.
Well, I know when we had this discussion before during the last budget, one of the concerns was that it wasn't that we didn't have the machinery or the capability. What we had right now was a lack of personnel, and it was a highly trained person that had to run that machine and maintain that machine. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jeffrey, but I remember that that was part of the issues, and it wasn't that we don't use it. It's a matter of getting the person who is trained to work that machinery free enough from their current duties, based on the fact that we have a short staff doing many other things to do that job. So if I'm wrong, please somebody correct me, but that's what I remember.
Ma'am, your recollection is correct. It's an extra body that we would have to add, first of all. And then second, one of the biggest issues with respect to the street sweepers are they're incredibly expensive machines. They start somewhere around $250,000. They're unfortunately extremely difficult to maintain, and they do break down a lot. So they're just expensive to keep as well as to run. So when we were looking for things to take out of the budget to make life easier and cheaper, that was one of them a couple of years ago. And so that's why you don't see it. You don't see us sweeping streets right now.
Right. And so I'll just put in the thought out there, if we're talking about 5 years in advance, you know, even if it was for, you know, the very tail end, we're not talking about the first 3 or 4 years. I'm just, at what point, you know, we're talking about invest in the things that the community, needs. I'm just putting a thought out there. And maybe that's something that we can entertain at least, or just have a discussion about. I'm not looking for a solve to the issue or a solve to the question, not the issue, the question. But I do think that was, I just wanted to throw it out there and see what, is there something, I mean, Ella, do you suggest, what do you think would be the more appropriate way to just have that discussion and see if anybody is willing to do that kind of investment on a CIP, not on an annual budget thing, I'm talking about just put it on the map. How,
Well, if you look at what Jeff has said, it is a person that needs to be added to the staff in order to run it. And then the sweepers that we have, they are so old, they'll break down. So you have to look at purchasing new ones. So we talked at one time about talking to Republic and see if they can add it into our contract for street sweepers. So it's worthwhile talking about, but during the budget session.
And I would only add one thing, and that is recall that when we're having these conversations during preparation for the budget for fiscal 21, which is what we're in right now, we were looking at $1 million deficit, $1 million hole in our budget, and we were talking about salary reductions. And so that was one of the reasons why, while I think everybody would agree sweeping streets is a great idea, we're looking at priorities and trying to keep the staff that we've got. Why don't you keep going, Dave?
Well, that's actually the end of mine for this section. I think back to Lexi or on to PD.
Actually, that is the end of, as Dave said, the end of the parks funds. So now we're going to move into all of the capital improvement sales tax funds, which is everything else. And so Dave is correct. Police department is the next department up. So Chief Armstrong, if you would be willing to go over some of your items that have changed or the dollars amounts that have changed, please.
Yes, I get entrance music. Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
Just for the record, that was not my music, but it was just perfect time.
No, it was mine. I apologize. I was trying, since I'm called in on my phone, I tried to hit the mute button for me and I hit hold instead. So sorry.
Okay,
but it is walk-up music, so you're good.
Yes, yes.
Hey, if we want to do entrances, I can set that all up for you guys.
I'm good. I'm good. All right, so we're looking at line 50 in the police line, starting with police cars, police vehicles. This year's line has already been cut. That was done when we went through the last budget session, so no change there. But you do see some changes in the years out. Let's say I can't see it on my screen, but that's going to be for fiscal 22, 23, 24, and 25. You see the numbers increase, and just to give a little bit of more information and clarity to what the vehicles are looking at or looking like. Currently, we have 3 vehicles that's in our regular fleet in use that are over 100,000 miles. And so those 3 vehicles are not under any kind of warranty any longer. And so anything that happens to those vehicles is at complete cost to the city. The 8 Chargers that were bought back in early 2019, I believe, we bought those used. So those are another 8 vehicles that come to us with no warranty. And so, you know, that's going to be something that's going to add up over the years if we're not careful with how, you know, we are replacing the vehicles that have gone out of warranty and the ones that we see are breaking down and giving us problems. And so while, you know, we had to make cuts to this year, as you see what was added in the next couple of years is trying to add some of that back and spread it out. You know, we've talked to Dave at the shop, just looking to see as far as the equipment in the vehicles, what can be repurposed coming from an old vehicle going to a new vehicle, and what things would have to be purchased new because they're just too old, and we can't keep repurposing some of the older equipment. And so that's why we see some of the difference in the numbers, is taking that into account of the vehicles that will be coming out and what could be repurposed from those vehicles. If you come down to the next line, line 51, the dash and body cameras.
Chief, before we move down, just a quick question about the police cars. I mean, I think last year at this time, we had several police cars that had been wrecked, and so it wasn't just the ones that were getting older. We had additional pressures to fill our fleet with ones that weren't wrecked. That seems to have settled down, or like we don't have as many wrecked ones this year. It's just the warranties.
Yeah, now I don't want to say that out of my mouth because I don't want to.
I know, I was just gonna knock on wood.
Yeah, so knock on
Okay.
something for us, but,
Okay.
but yes, we the officers have been much better with the vehicles, and we have not seen the damage to vehicles, you know, that we were seeing in years past. But I just wanted to be on record that I did not say that.
So I'm knocking. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. But yes, ma'am. We have seen a significant improvement with that. So I'll come down next to the dash and body cameras. And so, like most of you all know, the body cameras that we've had for the last 5 years were given to the city. The city didn't have to pay anything for them, and so now that has ended, and we have to start paying for them. And so that starts this year in December is when that's up. And so what you see before you, and nothing changed this year. We had a line of what the numbers were going to be year one cost, but you do see some adjusted numbers for the next 4 years, and that's just the cost of the cameras. We've already had body cameras. We had to add in-car cameras. And both the body cameras and the in-car cameras are mandated by our consent decree that we have to have those. So we can't have one or the other. We have to have both. I do want to jump down really quick to line 61 and the data storage that you see that was originally budgeted at $20,000, and you see that has come out to zero. So in all the work that we've done on trying to make sure we found the best price and got the best deals with the body cameras, we were able to get the storage added into the price of the cameras. And so we don't have to purchase an additional server and have to worry about maintaining the server ourselves. And if it goes down or anything like that, everything is stored through the entity and through the company. And so, everything is taken care of with that. So we did get the best deal that was out there for us to get, because it's just technology that's just expensive. And there is no way around it. It's just expensive. So we did have that taken care of. Come down to the next thing that changed. You see the bulletproof vest line, which that is, partially grant funded. And so we actually reduced that when we went back and looked at the officers that are coming up this year that would need new vests or vest replacements compared to the officers that we're hiring. And the new, the time frame of when those would come up, we knew we weren't going to need the entire 7,000 that we originally had budgeted for this year for that line. So we were able to drop that down a little bit. And so another thing, that we're looking to see, if we can stretch out of this, and hopefully I'm not getting too ahead of myself with it, but I was been speaking with Chief Hampton. And they were looking at some things. We're trying to partner on seeing if we can add some vests that would be able to be utilized by the fire department for special, events and things that they may need it for, to see if we can pull that out of here also. So me and Chief Hampton are working on that. And so I think it was something that he had put into his, but it was taken out. We would try to get it done in hours. When you come down to the speed detection for the laser units, the change in this, the change that you see in that was just, it was a clerical error in the beginning. It was always 12,700 when it was originally budgeted and submitted. It's just when it went in, just a typo had it at 12,000 instead of the 12,700. We just got in, we put that out to get quotes in for those. So we just got the last one in. So we just have to go through all of the quotes and then we'll be ready to move forward with that. The one placeholder that you see in here is for evidence storage software. And so to kind of explain what that is we take in a lot of property here at the police department. And one of the things that is crucial for any police department is making sure that you have an efficient way to manage and track the property and the evidence that you take in. Because one thing that could derail a police department is to find out something that's gone wrong with your evidence storage. And so we had a separate software that the department has used for years and years to manage any evidence of property that we took in. And so the problem with that, and what just recently, came to me was that software hasn't been updated in maybe 5 or 6 years. And so it's due for a major upgrade. And so we're having problems with how it's working with adding new users to it. And so when we got the quote from the company, it was $6,700 to get that upgrade. But one of the things that we did was we looked at, so this system is separate from the ITI system that houses all of our CAD data and houses our record management system. And so we looked at our current records management system that has an evidence component to it also. And just this past week, we had a demo, a webinar demo of what that system does. And so we had an evidence technician sitting in that meeting. And so we're completely confident that that system that we currently have, which this is something that is already included in what we have, that we can transition and start using that same system. Okay. We can use that same system instead of having to have 2 separate systems. So the short of it is we won't have to spend the $6,700 to update this other system. We can use the system that we currently have. What I don't know the answer to, and why we still need the placeholder here, is the information that's in that old system. We still have to get with that vendor to see exactly, how we can either pull that data out and transfer it over into the system that we're going to be using that we're already, that we already pay for, it's already included, or if we have to pull it out and download it and keep it somewhere. And so we have to talk with them, because normally with any of these systems that house that data and that information, that's part of what goes into it, is when you want to extract the data, there's a cost to that. And so I still have to get that number to see, what's the best option for us to move forward. But we are going to be moving away from this software that we're using and just going with the other system. So it won't be that $6,700, but I can't tell you exactly what that number is going to be, because we have to get what that data extract number is going to look like. But it should be much lower than that if we have to pay anything at all. Naturally, we're going to be looking for an option that we can get done what we need to get done and not have to spend any money to do it, if that's possible. But once we get that, I'll be able to share that with you all. And then the last thing that we have on here, and I already hit on, is the data storage. And we were able to cut that completely. And it was added into the deal that we got for the software.
Hey, Jason, this is Chief Hampton.
Yes, sir.
When you were talking about the bulletproof vest at the end, you cut out once you started talking about us working together.
Well, yeah. And so, I was just explaining to them that, I think you had put it in yours originally, but it was one of the things that had to be cut out. And so we were working together to see if we can get some of that done for the fire department with what we have in ours.
Perfect. Okay.
And that's all I have.
Questions for the chief?
Okay, if there are no questions for Chief Armstrong, then we will move into the fire department section, and I'll ask Chief Hampton to address the new and changed items within the fire department, please.
Okay, thank you, Lexi, Jeff, and Mayor and Council. Once again, it's a pleasure to be here, but I didn't get no music, so.
You want a drum roll? I can do a drum roll.
Please, somebody, do something. There you go. First off, as you see a bunch of my items on here, whatever I have on this, I'm going to try to get grants for anything and everything. But some things there are not grants for, but sometimes grants just pop up. So if we see a pop-up grant, we're going to try to get it. As you see in the first line of the turnout gear, this year what I had budgeted and forecast, you're going to see an increase. That increase is due to my SAFER grant and getting gear for the firefighters and keeping my rotation going of the current gear. Right now with our current rotation and the way we do it, we're getting 4 years out of a set, and each firefighter has 2 sets of gear. But with that increase, and why we wanted to do it this year is because this is the biggest year that we get money returned to the city through the SAFER grant. So I believe it's 75 or 80%. If I'm not right, please correct me, Lexi. But so we should be able to get 75% of that, I believe.
Yeah, it's 75.
And then throughout the next 4 or 5 years, you're going to see an increase, and that's due to just because we're a fire department and we can increase it. So, then the air cascade, we're trying to get a grant, the AFG grant. Right now, we will have to replace that in 2023. My parts are getting harder and harder to find, and even locate or get. But it does not look like I'm going to get it this year in the AFG grant, but we will continue next year. We have a little better system. I think we'll be more successful next year. We did purchase monitors for the city and the fire trucks, and that was $65,000. What was not in here, we combined the AEDs and the monitors. I had the AED in there last year and the monitors. We joined those together, and we purchased everything for the city and the fire department in one, and we got a better deal. So as we go down, Jason and myself are working on bulletproof vest. Naturally, we're going to try to get a grant. The Lucas device, I am only going to get it if we do get a grant, okay? Because it is an assistant tool for us doing CPR. The guys know how to do CPR, but what it does, it's a little more consistent CPR in a longer time period. But they're very expensive, and the only way I really should get that or can get that is going to be through a grant. Then I have a fire engine, which is a pumper. That is one without a ladder, and you'll see that in 2026, and I have 850,000 down. Now that number could increase or decrease. That also could be pushed off another year or two, but I wanted to put it on there as a placeholder because we have to see how our reserve truck's doing. At that time in 2026, my reserve truck's going to probably be closer to 24, 25 years old. And my front out truck is going to be closer to 15 years. So we're getting to the point of replacing those at that time period. We finished the training room, but we do have, we want to keep the update. We don't want to have these big purchases all at one time anymore. So what we did is we created like where we can go in every couple of years and do an update to the training room. Our training room is well used by a lot of departments within the city. The replacement of fire gear, our fire equipment, that is an ongoing program that we're doing, and that is like hoses and things like that that really need to be replaced. They're worn out. Now the next thing is my command vehicles. 3002, which is my command vehicle that's there every day. that runs all the calls. One of my issues is it was pushed back from this year to the following year. One of the issues with the 3002 is it's we carry so much now that the vehicle itself is overweight with what we have to carry. So when we're driving this vehicle, it's actually like you're driving almost impaired. So, and Dave has done everything that he can do. So I would like to see if we could, get this replaced as soon as possible. It is more of a safety issue. And I've been talking to Jason. The vehicle is still a good vehicle. And Jason and myself kind of agreed that we could possibly give this, if he would like it, to the police department for his detectives. So it would still be used for the city and possibly give PD another vehicle.
What line is that? I'm sorry.
That is 79.
Line 79 or unit 79?
Oh, it's unit 3002. It's line 79.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then the command vehicle 3000, which is a vehicle that I drive, it's fine. We can push that off, and we'll probably even push off another year or so. The thermal cameras, we're going to try on grants and continue to try on grants, but when I have the placeholder in 2025, we will need to replace them. They're getting old, and we use them a lot. So that's all I have. If anybody has a question, I'd be happy to answer.
Chief Hampton, on the thermal cameras, how many of those do we have?
I have there's 3 in each one, so it's 6.
So, I mean, I know you said you're pushing that off to 2025, but I mean, that is a piece of equipment that's life or death. I mean, is there any possibility, or is there a need for something sooner? I mean, instead of replacing all of them at once, would there be benefit for replacing 1 or 2 next year and 1 or 2 the following year?
Yes and no. The cameras, I actually have 7. Right now we're looking at ones that we actually have in our face pieces. So the guys can view wherever they're viewing. They can see where, it's got thermal capabilities. We're trying to look at that. But if I can get them on a grant, I'd like to purchase it all. If I can get a grant, I'd purchase it all that year,
Got it.
But you kind of get better deals when you make larger purchases on my thermal cameras. But we've been replacing pieces. The biggest parts are the batteries and the lenses, the protective lenses, so we can actually see the what we're looking at.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Chief, this is Tony. I understand about grant, but I want to ask the question. I know you say everything that you plan with grants in mind. Out of that, what number items actually have grants or have had grants? Because grants as we know them are going to change pretty rapidly. And so I want to know, how positive do you feel knowing what items do usually have in the past have had a grant tied to it?
Yes, ma'am. Turnout gear, we have actually gotten a $50,000 grant, I believe, or a $45,000 grant years past from Firehouse Subs. It's us seeking out some grants. The Lucas device, Firehouse Subs is very big at giving Lucas devices out. The bulletproof vest, Jason will help me with that, and we will piggyback off that. The portable walkie-talkies, which I did not talk about, and I'm sorry, that is actually going to be a $100,000 purchase. That will be an area grant, though. That will be not one fire department. That'll be all of North County. So that 50,000 may be 0 even. So the thermal cameras, it's all really, we're learning since I've become chief, we're learning a little bit more on how to get these grants. Okay. And I think we got a really good stream of what we need to do now to get some of these grants. And I think we'll be more successful next year for the AFG. The AFG just closed last Friday. And, but we learned a lot this go around.
Great. Do you have a team of grantors?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, we just also, which hasn't been announced yet, which will be coming out here. We just got the Missouri American Water grant again.
Right.
What? I'm sorry.
No, I said great. I saw.
I'm sorry. Yeah, and I have 4 gentlemen and 1 female that work on just grants. That's one of their duties.
Okay. And I have one more question. Are you training folks to write grants?
Yes, ma'am. We've actually taken a couple courses that is picked up in my operating budget under training. I sent them to St. Louis County Fire Academy has it, and we've gone there numerous times. But each time, you know, it's more or less getting out there talking to people, seeing how they're writing their grants, and trying to use some of their materials. And with our financial reports, we should be doing better than what we do, and we will do better than what we do. I've been working with Lexi a little bit.
I didn't see anybody at the virtual from Ferguson.
No, I was not able to make that one, but we will be at the next ones.
Okay, now if you want, I can share that information with you. They did a great job, so that'll be something that we can talk about. It went over much better than what most people thought. The comments and feedback was fantastic. I'll just let you know that now.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm very appreciative to get that information.
Okay.
Councilwoman Burrow, I'll take it too.
Oh, no problem. It's to both of you. Great, good deal.
And so I also want to say, you know, I've been me and Jason have also been working with Lexi or Lexus on a lot of the COVID grants. We're working right now with the SEMA grant. We did get the AFGS grant, which is a supplement grant. We picked up a lot of stuff before we got the CARES Act grant going, so which helped out. And then I believe Jason may have picked up a grant or 2 as well.
I'll tell you both right now. I was on the commission call just before taking this call, and the governor did release $2 million, and it's going to go for education. So the thing to do on that, I don't know if you put it out tonight, but it did get approved this morning. To jump on that grant, that $200, and you can use it for education for your, if you wanted to go and take the grant training, or send anybody you want, because it's $495 per person, but you can cut that in half if you send more than 2. But we'll talk about that too. But for $2 million, and he just opened it up today, that's what he had taken back earlier, and he just gave it back. So I would have your grant people to take a look at that. That's easy right there.
And you know, the city, once before, we had a guy that did just grants, and we would go to him and he would really help us out with grants. And back in the day, we were getting grants a little bit better because we had a guy that really knew the grant system inside and out. And I know the city has looked at trying to get personnel to fill that spot again, which, you know, that could lead to a lot of other money that the city could get through all departments.
Right.
But yes, I'm very interested in that.
Okay. And you know, with the CARES Act, there's going to be a lot of grant business in that.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I talked to Kevin about that last Friday. So we really do need to sit down and talk about what we can do, because there are going to be some folks like myself that's going to be doing some free training, and we might as well do it at home. Charity begins at home.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for Chief Hampton? Okay, if there aren't, I'd like to move on to the infrastructure, which are the streets, sidewalks, and parking lots. Since we don't have a public works director, I'll go ahead and discuss this. As we have talked before during the budget, we had cut out all the street projects for this current fiscal year because our budget was not balanced. There is a projection, or we're requesting $300,000 for 2022, $400 for 2023, $400 for 2024, $400 for 2025, and $550,000 in street replacement for 2026. We are also still looking to spend the $155,000 that we get, which is the Community Development Block Grant Funds. And we're anticipating getting that every year for the next several years, and that will be used in low to moderate income, low mod income for sidewalk and street replacement. So for the total amount of $455,000 for next year, and then on up for the next several years. We are still also, this fiscal year we had no sidewalks, but we are anticipating having sidewalks for the next several years, as well as including $5,000 for sidewalks in 2026. The only other real changes I have are that we actually had to make a, I have it as orange because it is a grant, but this is also a change. The South Dade, that's supposed to be Dade with an E, not Dade with a W. Grant, when Dave and I were talking, or I guess Dave was talking with someone with MoDOT, and he was able to get the information that there's apparently a South of Dade grant that we're supposed to be doing engineering work this fiscal year on. So because the grant started this year and it needs to be finished by 2023. So that's what it's budgeted to spend, the $571,000, which was added in, and then the $103,555 for this fiscal year was added in, and that's for the engineering portion of that. Also, what was added that was not part of the CIP for last year was the $900,000 to $900,000 for the Florissant Road STP grant that needs to be spent for the actual construction of the grant. The $67,500 that is budgeted for this fiscal year is strictly just for the engineering of the grant, of the program. The same, it goes for the Frost Avenue STP grant. The $67,500 is strictly for the engineering portion. The $343,971 is for the actual road replacement. So those two items were added as well. I'm not sure why they weren't on here. If that's what the grant value is, so that's why I have it in there.
Hey, Lexi.
Yes,
can I stop you right there for a second? And Jeffrey, if you'll help me out on this. If I remember correctly, the engineering portions of these were already bidded out, and Matt Unrein got a overall price from one company that was able to do, you know, a better price for 3 projects. So if I remember correctly, that has already been bidded out, and we should have an engineering company already scheduled to do that, correct?
I believe so. I believe it. I know that Weiss Design Group is doing the Florissant Road as well as the Frost, and I believe they're doing the South Dade, but for some reason it was not included in the CIP or in the budget for this fiscal year at the end of last year. I'm not sure why.
Okay.
I just found a folder that said South Dade.
Okay. Councilwoman Robinette, do you remember that to be the case? You got a great memory. That's why I'm asking.
Not this year, I don't. No, I don't recall actually.
Okay.
So we'll have to dig into that.
I do remember that being out there. Okay, thank you, Lexi. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Lex, before
really all.
Lexi, this is Tony. I got a quick question for you about the sidewalk situation. Did we consider the grants that were out there for different municipalities that had balking going on in their cities for those grants and for the number of senior citizens that are in the city? Has anybody taken a look or a stab at that?
And Councilman Burrow, I will be completely honest with you. I don't know if Matt had ever looked at anything like that, or if the previous Public Works Director had. This is really not something that I normally deal with. I'm just trying to help fill in the absence of a Public Works Director. I know that Dave Musgrave has been working with the garage on trying to figure out kind of where things are in what we can do grant-wise. But I am not aware of any
Look, I don't want to take
activity that's happened yet.
I appreciate you being honest. I don't want to take you out your lane. I'll get with Dave on that and talk to him about it.
Right. Well, once we get our new public works director in, I do believe that that is one of the things that we were going to ask this person to do, would be to look for other grants other than just the STP and the CDBG. That we know there's other grants out there for streets and roads and sidewalks, and we just need to have someone to spend the time to actually look for them. I know that, you know, Matt was busy with a lot of other stuff as being public works and assistant city manager, but this new person, I believe, is just going to be public works director, and we're hoping they'll have more time to kind of focus on things going forward. Are there any other questions about streets? Okay. If there aren't, then we will move on to the common fleet section, and this would be handled by Dave Musgrave, please.
Thank you, Lexi. Again, Mayor and City Council, thank you. The first item that's a change is going to be our dump truck, the 1 ton. It's number 2. After talking to Dave over at the garage, we were going to push that back to 2025. I'll get to it down later. The main primary reason is because the 1.5 ton, if you look at number 118, it's line item 118, it's unit 77. Matt had talked about just replacing the bed on that unit, but it is a lot worse for wear, according to Dave, than what we thought. So basically the 1 ton, that's line item number 102, it's unit number 2. We're pushing it back because it's in better condition, but moving number 77 up. We had budgeted $20,000 on our current year to just replace the bed. We're actually going to need to replace that entire unit in 2022. So we're kind of flip-flopping those 2 units. If you'll look, the yellow kind of corresponds by flipping those back and forth. The next change is going to be dump truck number 10. The cost of that truck was raised by $15,000 just because the state bid actually is higher than what we thought it was. So that's the only change there. We raised it from 85 to 100 in 2023. The next one's going to be our mechanic service truck, unit number 26. The truck was pushed back. It's pushed back from 23 to 24, primarily because Dave thinks it'll last another year. The next change on here is going to be an addition, and it's actually going to be the code enforcement vehicles. Code enforcement traditionally has used the Crown Vics and whatever other vehicles we have laying around the garage for their vehicles. We put in, because Dave thinks it's a better idea, to actually purchase some code enforcement vehicles dedicated straight for code enforcement. If you recall, Jason had mentioned some of the Chargers, some other units we've purchased. 4 or 5 years from now, we won't have vehicles that we can just kind of roll over to code enforcement. And so the idea is to purchase 2 code enforcement vehicles in 25 and then 2 in 26 that'll be dedicated vehicles, primarily because we will get 15, 20 years out of those vehicles versus piecemealing together some old cop cars for those guys to roll around town for code enforcement. Next one's going to be our maintenance van. We moved that up 1 year because it is very worse for wear. So we're moving that from 2023 to 2022.
Is that unit 72?
Looking, I'm sorry.
No, it's on line 113.
Yeah, it's line 113. It's just a maintenance van.
Okay, I'm going through the individuals because I can't see the big sheet with my eyesight. So I was just wondering.
While you're doing that, can I ask Dave a question?
Yes.
Dave, tell me here, how real is this? Because I look at some of these cars that some of these guys are driving, and I'm wondering if you got duct tape. and that's only because I did 10 years stretch over there in U City at Larry's Auto Center as the office manager. And some of these Crown Vics you got, I mean, why don't you just go ahead out and say we need a couple of SUVs, even on the Paw Patrol. That's what my granddaughter called the dogs, the Paw Patrol cars. Seriously? I mean, I've been up close and personal with a couple of them, 2 of them, and I thought they were ready for the junk. And we're talking about moving them down 5 or 6 more years. You wishing on a star. You tell me if I'm just exaggerating, Dave. Because if this was utopia and you have your dream and we didn't have to deal with the budget and cutting something out and cut, what would you do for real if it was utopia? Because I don't think it's what we're talking about here tonight.
Well, and that's one of the reasons, even with the Parks truck that we picked up. Truthfully, we're trying to get as much use out of these vehicles as we can and trying to move it where the dollars make sense. And that's the primary reason for the code enforcement vehicles. You're 100% correct. Those Crown Vics are many, many moons past due for replacement. And that's the main reason we're saying that, hey, we need to go ahead and purchase new vehicles to replace those. Because we nickel and dime our cars to death. You guys have been over the garage. You drove by the garage. You see the wrecked vehicle piecing stuff together for. And that's the bottom line. This is as real as possible at this point with replacing, moving things around and those things. This is by the skin of our teeth, for lack of a better term. We're trying to get everything, every dollar we can out of these vehicles.
I'm just going to tell you, it has not been 2 months ago when one of the police officers, I didn't know it was him. And I said, hey, you driving your private car? And come to find out, his Crown Vic was broke down in his drive. He had to pull out, he had to drive around his yard to get out. And that's not the first time I've heard about that. So I really would like, and I love you being honest about it, I really would like for us to do a deep scrub and put some real vehicles where they belong. And because if you're talking about safety, Dave, we're talking about your folks, we'd be the first one to say on the council, oh, our staff, they're our best asset, but we're not having them ride with safety for real. And those dogs cost a lot of money when you figure out how much training we give them. And so you put all of that together with a human life, you got a big chunk of ching-ching right there. So I would like to see this with the reality that you just spoke with. And let's just go ahead and do that, because every now and again we come up with some money that we said we didn't have, and maybe we ought to do that scrub. And if it were me, if I was making the decision tonight, I'd say we needed to be in your shop if we was gonna fudge, scrub, or whatever you want to do. So you got my vote if you want to go get a new one. Tell them Tony sent you.
I appreciate that.
You know, and I agree with that. I agree with you 100%, Councilwoman. You know, but the reality of where we are today is we need to find a way to take $100,000 to $200,000 of cost of stuff that we really need to buy out of this capital improvement sales tax estimate right now. And so as much as I'd like to spend new dollars on new cars for code enforcement, you know, those cars are still serviceable, number one, and number two, we've got 2 mechanics, and you know, a whole fleet of new cars means I'm not working my mechanics anymore. So we've gone through this process, and I appreciate the question, because we've agonized over these, and you know, this is a serviceable fleet.
And that's the primary reason they are in 25 and 26, because we can make them work for the next 2-3 years. But like you said, they are getting to the end of their life cycle, and that's why they're as late in this process as they are. And the last change that you'll see on here, like I mentioned earlier, is the 1.5 ton dump truck with plow. And we just flip-flop those 2 trucks. And then we've got the dump truck in 2026. It's going to be the unit number 6. And we've pushed this out as late as we can, clear out to 2026. And it's going to be a $160,000 truck to replace that unit. But those are our common fleets. If you've got questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. This isn't usually my cup of tea, but I have spoken to Dave multiple times to figure out what we need and what we can push and what we can't.
Are there any questions?
I would just like to say that I appreciate Dave pushing along our vehicles as long as we can, and you know, I know we salvage everything that we can, and it's saving us money. So I appreciate the work that's being done. I mean, especially right now, and we have so many major holes.
And I would also say that I appreciate the work that all of you guys have done wearing multiple hats doing this CIP. And you know, no pun intended, but you know, Dave, you may be pushing those cars along like Heather said. Just kidding.
And I want to thank you, Councilwoman Robinette, because I want to say the same thing. You know, we've had a very short period of time in order to do this, and Lexi and Dave and Chris have all stepped up and filled in their parts, and I appreciate them for doing it.
There's no doubt that everybody's doing the best they can. I get it. However, if we are going to be real true to a budget, it's good to tell the truth. And that's what I appreciate Dave doing, because I don't care how good your mechanics is, those nuts and bolts are only going to last for so long. And even if you get with some parts, you can't find the part, how much man time are you putting out of those two mechanics that you got using duct tape? And that's what it comes down to. I babysitted a 57 Chevy for almost 20 years, so I know how much it, finally I told my husband it's either 57 Chevy or it's me. But the bottom line is, I don't doubt that everybody's doing what they can, they got to. But now, some of the information that I gave out, I got it from the horse's mouth. And that means the guys that's driving those cars. So I didn't just make this up. And if we got any way that there's a money laying around that we can find when we want to do something else, then I think we ought to put it in those cars. I just like cars, that's all. Hey guys, I gotta go, got another appointment. Thanks so much for all you do. Good night.
Dave,
Yes, ma'am.
how's the Jolly Trolleys? Are they holding up pretty good? We don't have any repairs for them?
No, ma'am.
Okay,
those
good.
are great. I'll be honest with you, COVID helped us on that. We didn't run them as much, and we're able to run them very frugally at this point because our head counts are down on that. But both are in great standing order right now.
Good, thank you.
Not a problem.
Are there any other questions regarding the common fleet? If not, we'll move on to the facilities section. This is gonna start out with Dave, if you do the first couple, and Elliot and Jeff will jump in when it's time, please.
Ma'am. The first one on there is the vehicle AC charging station. There's no change to it, so we're going to skip past that. The next two, there are a change, and that's going to be our vehicle fueling software along with our fuel island and gate card reading software upgrade. We had those in 2023. I'll be 100% honest with you, we need to do them now, primarily because we have had the system down on multiple occasions within the past few months. And we see revenue from other municipalities locally purchasing fuel from us. We've had at least 2 occasions since I've been handling the garage, and mind you, that's only been a month now, where the fueling station has been down. And if we can't sell gas, we can't make revenue from the gas. Same with the gate reading software. If people can't get into the gates, they can't purchase the gas, and we're on our last leg with this system. The bottom line is it needs upgraded. Like I said, we've moved it up to forecast it for this year, primarily because we can't do it without it. And that's just the bottom line. So you'll see the $7,750 on the vehicle fueling software. You'll see the $19,000 on the fuel line and gate card reader. Those two systems work in tandem so that people can access the fuel and get into the system. And that's just the bottom line with it. It's got to be updated. So those are those two.
Are there any questions for Dave on this project?
No, we've talked about it before, so.
Okay, then, if Elliot, would you, are you ready to jump in for the floodproofing?
I am, Lexi, thank you, and members of council. So this is line 130, floodproofing barrier for salt shed. To give a brief background, when the salt shed was built, it was built in the flood area and without a flood, what's called a floodplain development permit, and above what's called the base flood elevation.
I'm sorry, excuse me. I'm getting a lot of feedback, Elliot, from, I don't know if this is interrupting anyone else, but I'm getting a lot of feedback only when you speak, Elliot.
Okay, turn off I turned the volume down on my phone. Is that better?
No.
Oh,
All right, well, I'll tell you what, come back to me. I'll turn my phone on and mute my sound on the computer.
okay. Okay, I'll jump in. We'll talk about the fence and then we'll come back to the salt shed. Council will recall that we had a brief discussion a couple of weeks ago about the concern we have for officer and building safety and the possibility of installing a fence from the south side of the fire department to the property line just short of Vincenzo's, and obviously we could do a couple of different things there. We had priced it at using a cantilever on that fence as well. And right now that's what this $47,458 is for.
So I'm going to go on record just as saying that I don't want this done. I don't want one penny spent on a fence. I think we need to look into a communication strategy. I think we need to look into a public relations strategy. I think we need to educate the world as to what Ferguson has accomplished. And I do not want a fence.
Yeah, I was going to say that since we heard about this, you know, I was thinking all the different, you know, like all the pros and cons. And other than saving money for potential defacing or anything that hits the police department, I just really feel it sends a bad message after all that we've tried to do as a community to, you know, de-escalation policies and all of that. I think putting up a fence that looks like a prison yard, especially in the downtown corridor, sends the wrong message that we've been trying to get to. So I really am not, there is no way that I can see that would be a good idea at this point.
Can I chime in on this?
Sure.
Well, first off, you know, the thought process behind this was not anything that looked like a prison, for one. And so, you know, a lot would go into, you know, what it would look like. And so to speak to the comment about it serving the purpose as far as something hitting the building, honestly, to me, the building is secondary. The primary reason that we need this is for the mental well-being of our officers. Because they're the ones that have to stand out there and they have to take the verbal punishment and the verbal beating, you know, from these individuals every time they show up here. And now everybody that comes out here is not coming to cause us harm or to damage the property, but sometimes people do. And just you know, it's hard to put into words, and it's hard to, you know, to really convey, you know, what all goes into this, you know, for the outside world that just is able to watch this while it's being live streamed, as opposed to the individuals that have to go out there and stand up on that line every time that these individuals come, particularly for things that they had no contribution, no control over, things that happen other places, you know, around the area, the state, or the country. And you know, Councilwoman Lipka, you know, I agree with everything that you said as far as the messaging and stuff, but all of the strides and all of the positive things that we've done, not just since I've been here, but the people that were here before I got here and the years of work that have gone into this city over the last 6 years, that didn't stop individuals from coming to this building on May 30th this year and trying to burn this building down because we were the Ferguson Police Department. And so, you know, we can put all the communication strategies in place that we want to put into place. That some of that stuff is not going to matter to some individuals that just because we're Ferguson want to come here and want to do us harm. And so, you know, when I have to look into the faces of the men and women that work at this police department after that night is over with at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm trying to reassure them to come back the next day, like that's what I see. And that's the importance of getting something in place that where we could better manage this, not just for the destruction of the property, but just for the well-being of our employees and of our officers, because that's the number one at the top of my list of why this is important. And so I'm completely flexible in what this looks like. And I'm sure there are some options out there. You know, when we heard about this, we all had a vision and our mind went somewhere of what this could look like. And so I know that's driving what we're talking about. And so we haven't had the time to really look and see, you know, what other options are out there, or you know, what this could look like to where we maintain the look of a downtown and everything and the welcoming that we want our downtown district to have, at the same time providing the safety and the measures in place that we need for when, you know, when we have to deal with other things that come to our doorstep, so to speak. And so, you know, it's absolutely, I don't want this to look like a jail. That's one of the reasons I've never worked for a sheriff's department, because I'm not going to work in a jail every day. And so it's not about it looking like a fortress or anything. We just, what we've been doing and what has been at play for these last 5-6 years is not adequate right now. And what we're seeing is not just about what happens here in Ferguson. What happened in Minneapolis, you know, sparked people to want to come here and do us harm, physical harm, people shooting at us and people trying to burn down our building. And so, you know, we have to take that stuff into account also, for, you know, maybe people that don't pay attention to Ferguson, but when something sparks them, this is ground zero for a lot of people.
We'll always be ground zero. You're right, Chief. And,
Yes.
and I, you know, like you having to face the officers who stood bravely and de-escalated situations during things that had nothing to do with Ferguson. I agree there needs to be something. I don't think permanent fencing may be the right thing to do. So perhaps if you could look into other, you know, I know like the temporary barriers, those are lightweight and can be easily moved. Right. I know. But perhaps there's something that isn't there every day, but that can be rolled out in a time of crisis that is a little more sturdy and a little more, you know, that could be stored in the garage or stored at the back of the lot. Just so that I'd like to continue to look inviting, but keep you guys protected. So those are just my thoughts. I'm one of 7, so please, everybody else.
Just for the record, when I first talked to Jeff about this, I told him this thing could be pink for all I care. I don't care what it looks like. We need something in place here, period. And we'll, you know, like I said, as long as it's an option on the table, I can look and see what options and things are out there to facilitate what we need to get done.
Chief, this is Tony Barrow. I can't get out the door because this is one of the subjects I wanted to voice an opinion on. Kudos for you for putting the safety of our officers or anybody that's involved with the presence at the time. Mentally, I like that piece. Physically, I don't like fence. I don't like any kind of barriers. You know, you check over there in Berlin and all these other places. You can even check with the wall that Trump is trying to build. What I'm looking at is this. For a situation where you got a couple of people on the council where the yes or no will come from that's in the same mindset, then I think what it probably needs to happen is all those options you talked about that you might want to go look and see. Because what I'd like to know, for any police facility that has dealt with rioting and protesters that are violent, then I'd like to know if they did erect a fence or any kind of barrier, what was the mindset of the community? I'd like to have some data so that we can take a look and make some intelligent decisions about, yeah, that could happen, because even at my church, we have gates that can be closed, opened, locked down if we want them locked down. So that's an option right there.
And Councilwoman, that's what the pitch is for that kind of option, things that could be closed when needed to be closed. Yes,
right, exactly. So I just want to let folks know I use those quite a bit over in Richmond Heights. So there's several churches over there that we have that. And they can be electronic even. You can shut them from inside. You can shut them from it. Even if something was wrong with the electricity, you could do it manually. There are a lot of options. My option would be I don't want a fence. But when you talk about the security of a human life, you have to look at options. So the mindset is correct. You're putting our asset as our people, but I think that in order to keep it on the table, there needs to be some more information. Just putting it on the table so we can talk about it. But if you're talking about putting dollars behind it and actually erecting something, I think that kind of information should have come forth first. But since it hasn't, I would like to see it before we go any further with it. And I could really do it, but thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to voice my opinion.
And Chief Armstrong, when I stated that, I was coming from a perspective of a mental picture of it looking like, like an encampment. Now, when I listen to you talk and I hear your voice and I hear the true concern, and I am 100% behind our law enforcement. And I was out there that night and I know what you're talking about. So that didn't cross my mind. That's not how it was presented to me. That aspect was not part of the conversation when it was presented. So now that it is part of the conversation, it totally alters my perspective. And so I agree with Councilwoman Robinette. I agree with Councilwoman Burrow. I would like to see some more. I am going to retract my stand in regards to I don't want. What I want to say is I want to see more, and I want to keep the conversation open, and this is what negotiations are made of. One thing I will tell you is this last weekend when I was on my anniversary in Memphis, now that I'm on city council, my husband's so annoying because I look at things that other cities do, and I don't just go and have vacation. I look at their infrastructure and everything else. And he's like, can we just enjoy ourselves? Anyway, the point being is that when we were on Beale Street, one of the things I noticed about Beale Street, we were down there for lunch and the streets were completely open and there was plenty of pedestrian traffic. But when the evening came, we noticed that the streets were shut down. And when I looked up, they have these pilings that were up against the edge, and then they're on a track, and the track then comes out, and I took pictures of it because I was so impressed, and it blocks off the street. So maybe there's something out there. I mean, there's an industry for this, so maybe there is something out there that we can look into that would do similar aspects for us, because you're not looking, from my understanding, you're not looking for this to be barricaded 24/7. You're looking for something to be able to protect the safety and mentality of our officers during those hurricane moments. When the hurricane hits, we got to be able to have a hurricane plan.
Yes.
Okay. So,
and I'm more than open to you guys sending me down to Memphis, take a look and spend some time on Beale Street. Just saying.
Chief Armstrong.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. I do understand that the health and safety of our police officers are your number one priority. I do understand that. However, putting a fence up, to me, sends a message that we're fearful, and that is not a good message to send by erecting a fence. So I'm not in agreement with a fence going up, but like you said, there are some options out there. But as far as a fence, no. But I do understand our officers are your number one priority.
And they're all of ours too.
I'm going to say this, Tony speaking. I'm going to say this. Just take the word fence off, Chief. That's what I would do if I was you, if I wanted to stop the controversy. And then talk about a barrier. That might be a better thing. It's that easy. It sounds simple, but if everybody's concerned about that 5-letter word fence, call it a barrier. And then you have the luxury of going out to find what it is that everybody, well, you're not going to make everybody happy, but you would find out. The main thing is, I said for the third time, I love the fact that you're thinking about the mentality where your officers are emotionally, physically. You got every base covered. And all you need to do is just change the word. It's called wordsmithing, in case somebody want that.
Yep.
Chief Armstrong.
Yes, ma'am.
This is Fran. I appreciate you for expressing your concern for your officers. I mean that's a very good quality to have. You know, when you're responsible for other people, and I appreciate you for sharing that as well, because it gives an opportunity for people who are not in your position to be able to see a human side to just more than just the symbol that you have or that you carry. Um, I was also out there that night, and for me, I just look overall at what we're working with in our community and what we're trying to do. And I have, for me, it made me realize this is really, you know, honestly, the first or second time, you know, here in Ferguson that you've experienced that. And it's a constant challenge that we have to go through as a community, because you do have, you know, things. There's so many things that I could say as a person who's been active and participating in not just the community but on the council seat in terms of trying to create that change. And we have come a very, very long way, and it is oftentimes misunderstood and not even recognized what exactly has changed. That's the conversation that I find myself constantly having with people, because we need for people to know what has happened here. But at the same time, you represent a symbol. And I also I listen, you know, you actually took an oath to protect and serve, to risk your life. I understand that as well. And to me, what I heard was that if you're in this, regardless of whether I believe the system, it should be the way it is, or it should be a different way, regardless of all of that, just you, simply you and the officers being in a position where you have to be in the community and interact with the community. What I heard was we need some type of mental health to make sure that we're supporting people, regardless of whether it's police officers, firefighters, staff members, council people, mayors, everybody that is involved, community. We need to really start finding ways to support one another in a mental way. And so I get I'm not for the fence thing. I'm not for the fence thing. I do understand the challenge that you have. But I think if we're going to put money anywhere, that's where it should be. And I also feel like we just spoke. I heard Councilwoman Burrows speak for the need of some vehicles. I just brought up a crazy, hairy idea 5 years in advance, and we can't even get to a point where we can talk about what we can do 5 years in advance. So I think something like that, to me, even from a budgetary standpoint, when the council is saying, look, we need to get this for the community, we should do this to improve things of the community, and we can't even get that done. I think this is one of those things that we have to look at and just say, okay, maybe now is not the time to even have that discussion. That's just my opinion, because we need to protect our community. We have to do that. And there's so many things and so many people that each one of us represent that, you know, we hear all the time. And so I understand, I respect your leadership role that you have in being over people. And if there's any kind of way that we can do something along those lines in terms of really getting them the help that they need so that they can come back, because you're looking at it from a standpoint, I need my guys to be able to be okay so they can come back into work, so they can, you know, I get that. And I respect your position, but that's my thoughts on it.
I think what I'd like to suggest at this point in time that clearly there's a lot of opinions and a lot of strong opinions and a lot of strong feelings. And I think everybody's had an opportunity to hear some different perspectives. And what we really need to do at this point in time is take this back and put on our thinking caps and try and figure out a different way to do this, or a different name to call it, and take it from there. So why don't we do that and say that we're just going to hold this in abeyance for the time being, and go back and rethink it and come back to council.
Sounds like a plan.
I'm good with that. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Okay.
And thank you, Chief Armstrong.
Right. Thank you all.
Thank you. Elliot says he's ready to go. So Elliot, can you restart the floodproofing barrier for the salt shed? You were about to tell us why or the background on this.
Let's get salt.
Yeah. So first of all, is there any feedback?
No.
No.
Okay. Okay. So I wouldn't want you to be assaulted by my voice.
Oh no.
I loved it.
Nope, hang up on him. Hang up.
All right. Now, in all seriousness, so what happened is that the salt shed was built without flood proofing and without a floodplain development permit, and those are required because through our flood insurance program for any building that's built in a flood zone, which this is, and so what we need to do, because the SEMA, the State Emergency Management Agency, has put us under advisory since at least 2016 about this. If it's not fixed, and soon, we run the risk of being kicked out of the flood insurance program for everybody in the city. So what I have done is I've looked at the building, and I've talked with SEMA, and they've had a seminar on floodproofing solutions, and there are numerous possible solutions that are on that link that's on my CIP page. I based the 25,000 that I put on the sheet on a solution that I think is reasonably workable, and it is cost effective. It's a relatively simple fix. And there is a possibility, as noted on the form as well, of a 75% grant from SEMA for up to, as I said, for up to 75% of the funding of the project.
I think I'd like Elliot, can I interrupt?
Yeah. Yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Elliot. I wanted to let everybody know that Elliot and I went down to the garage area earlier today to look at something else. And while we were there, we took a look at the salt shed. And I understand what Elliot's talking about and the proposed solution. One of the things that we did discover, and guys, I'm not an engineer, so I don't know if this is important or not, but in inspecting the interior of the salt shed, and I'll remind you that this is really just a bunch of concrete blocks that are piled up one on top of the other to create a wall, an interleaving wall. And then those concrete blocks are attached one below to the one above with bolts and nuts and a securing plate. So the whole structure holds together. What we noticed, or what I noticed and pointed out to Elliot, one of the two, is that those bolts and nuts on the interior of the building are extremely corroded. And everybody knows what a corrosive substance salt is and how it used to ruin cars before they started making cars better. And that's exactly what's going on inside this building. And my fear at this point in time is that that they're going to corrode through certainly sooner than later. And so what I'd really like to do at this point in time, I understand what Elliot's saying, and we'll speak with SEMA and try and explain to them that this is really going to end up, I think, being a two-step process, and we really need to, while we're inside trying to address the flood issues related to this building, we also need to examine the structural issues. So what I'd like to do is kind of put this on the back burner, and unfortunately this is another one of those projects we're going to have to start dealing with quickly, but we've got to do the job right in the first place. And so what I'd like to do is just slow this down a little bit, give us a little bit of time to work on this on a parallel process, both as working at the floodplain issue as well as the structural issues. So I'm not certain. What I'm saying is I'm not certain this is going to be done in 2021, and I'm not certain the cost is $25,000 at this point in time.
How long do you think it's going to take, and how long do we have with the floodplain requirements?
Elliot, can you comment on the floodplain requirements timing?
Yeah, what SEMA has said is that when we say go, that we can have 12 months from whatever that point is, as long as we're not waiting a long period of time to start that clock to get the thing done. So if we said, yeah, we're going to get this, we're going to start on this in the winter, because when we looked at the building, we discovered that the brackets holding the building together are corroded and may fall apart, and we have to deal with that while we're dealing with this, and it's going to take till January to get that whole started. I am confident that they will say, okay, you can start the clock then, because there's some approval process on our end internally that we have to do that's going to take some time as well. So we got 12 months plus, a little bit of leeway on the front side, but not a lot. I mean, if we said, yeah, it's going to take 2 years, meaning 24 full months, I don't know that they're going to be happy with it. But if we took 2 to 4 months plus 12 would be fine, I think.
So Jeffrey, the question I have then is, if you want to slow down, right? And you want to get some more information, and you're wanting to have some time to gather information, correct?
Right.
So what is your timeline? I mean,
I can answer that.
Facilitate Elliot, we probably need to have a time frame on your request. So like if we say you have until December 31st, so that January 1st we can talk to Elliot about moving forward on his thing, would that be appropriate?
I think, ma'am, I think what will happen, Councilwoman, is we should be able to have a solution for this sometime in the spring, certainly, hopefully, before we present the fiscal 22 budget to council. And really, ideally, the timing on this would be sometime in the summer. And what we would do is we would work down our inventory of salt during this season, and so that we have little to no salt in the shed in the March time frame, or sorry, the May time frame, and then be in a position to do this work during the summer.
So you're saying doing the work in terms of actual replacement of the building or improvement of the building. I'm talking about the timeline of you getting all of the information pulled together and making the presentation. I mean, can we have that information, the architectural drawings, whatever you want to call it, can we have all of that in place by the end of 2020, like by the end of December, so that we can, I just feel like if we take too long, if we push out to spring, now we've taken 6 months off of a 14, 15 month timeline that Elliot just described. So, I'm concerned about that, because if we lose that floodplain insurance, we lose it for everybody, from what Elliot said.
Correct.
And we've already dealt with enough insurance companies in our city. So you know, that's my concern, is we've got to create this timeline that we can stick to and not put on in a folder and set it on the shelf. We can't do that. We don't have the ability. We don't have the luxury.
And ma'am, I absolutely understand what you're saying. I think that the end of this calendar year is probably a bit too aggressive, but certainly by the end of the first quarter.
It's let me share something. It's easier if you maintain the building, and especially salt and how corrosive it is. It's easy to make certain that all of that salt is out of the building or almost empty, because if anything happens and you have a worker in there and you have too much salt, you probably won't find that person. So waiting until after we deliver salt to the various municipalities and using it up is the safest way to rehab that building and put up a barrier. I'm only speaking from a maintenance point of view, from being around a maintenance person, my husband, for almost 40 plus years.
Well, and I agree with what you're saying. I'm just saying the paperwork of it, can we get started on that and have it by, like, you know, if you're going with what Jeffrey's saying, maybe have the paperwork, all of the bids, all of the designs, all of the concerns addressed by February. You know, and if climate change is any determining factor, since what we've seen with hurricanes and fires, I think we're going to use up all our salt this winter. So, you know.
Councilwoman, I absolutely understand exactly what you said. I don't know if February is the right number, but you're certainly in the right ballpark.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. And I apologize for dropping this on everybody at the last minute. It was just, we just happened to look inside the shed instead of on the outside and discovered this issue. So we'll get to the bottom of it as expeditiously as absolutely possible.
Maybe we should buy helmets for the salt guys this winter.
They should have them on anyway.
Right.
So I think we'll work on that. More than anything else, I wanted to make sure that everybody was in the loop and knew as much as we know right now. And maybe, Alexi, we can go on to non-departmental.
Okay. For non-departmental, we're going to start with Chris Crable, who's going to take care of like the IT, and we'll move on to a couple other people in this section as well. Chris?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Like Lexi said, I'm going to be talking about the IT infrastructure and the budget we're projecting for the next few years. For this year, you can see that we've projected a little bit lower than what we budgeted for the $29,000. For the next 5 years, we project we're going to spend $23,000 a year just on updating current computers. We do about 18 new desktops a year. We're on a 5-year replacement plan. So every 5 years, we try to replace computers. That's about 18 computers a year that we replace. And then we do iPads and Surfaces and everything that needs to be updated every year as well. And then we are going to spend about $6,000 this year on the virtual workstation. That's one of the other projects, the only other project we have projected this year. Or sorry, not virtual workstation, the wide area network to connect the police department and city hall and have a steady stream of communication and contact. And that's a year project that they're working on just to test. And the next year, again, we have the $23,000 worth of just technology updates, and then we're going to work on the virtual workstation. So trying to get software systems, be able to work remotely or be able to tie into the network when we're not at our desktops. And then for 2020, 2023, it's a little bit bigger projects going on that year. We have firewall replacement, and we try to replace that every like 5 to 7 years. So we have to replace, because of software changes and IT changes, we have to work on getting the software up to date. So that's a bigger project that we're going to be working on in 2020, 2023, as well as a server upgrade. We maintain about 25 servers at City Hall. And as we know, those things wear out and we have to get them updated and upgraded. So that's another project in 2020, 2023. The next year we have one other bigger project that we're working on, and that's the mail system upgrade. As we know, we all communicate via email and we have to work with each other for email. So updating the email system as new software comes out is something important, just to keep the steady flow of communication going throughout the city, and communicating with individuals outside the city as well. 2024, 2025, one of the other projects we're working on is, again, server upgrades. Every couple of years we have to upgrade the servers or different parts of the server. So again, that's just more server upgrades. And then in 2025, 2026, the bigger project that we're working on is software upgrades. Microsoft Office switches every few years. We know some of the older systems don't work or won't communicate with some of our new systems that we're using. So we have to plan ahead and look at upgrading Microsoft so we can communicate with our new systems. Any questions?
Okay, if there aren't any questions for Chris regarding the IT infrastructure, I'd like to move forward to the update of the electronic lock system, and that would be handled by Dave Musgrave, please.
Thank you, Lexi. So the electronic lock system, you guys actually, I believe, got a memo. We'll be getting one shortly. Basically, the electronic locks we use over at Firehouse do not work, and they're not the same system as the rest of the locks we use throughout the city. So currently, City Hall, Firehouse 2, along with PD, the City Garage, and the Community Center all have the same lock system. The unfortunate part is we have not updated that software or carried the updates for the past 5 years that I'm aware of, possibly longer. So we've had several glitches with the software and had to call out several service companies to have that fixed. This $13,000 will replace the locks at Firehouse, so they're on the same system as the rest of the city, as well as update all the software to get us current up to date. Moving forward, we will have a cost of $389 annually, so that we continue to have updates so that we don't have these problems that we're currently having down the road. So basically that automatically will update our software, keep it communicating well and all those lovely things. But that's what this $13,000 is for, is to get everyone on the same page and make sure the system is working properly moving forward.
Are there any questions regarding the updated lock software? If not, I'll go over the document management system. This document management system, it was budgeted for $1,000. It's actually going to cost about $1,500 for this year, and we're anticipating adding in another $1,500 for next year. I'm sure the council can remember that we had had a new software system that we were going to use for the HR department to put all the files in an electronic form. We started working on that. We had at one point we had a full-time person that was filling in on a temp basis to help try to get that program moving forward after Joanna left. Then after Vita was here, we had somebody else coming in on a part-time basis to try to get those documents scanned. Unfortunately, COVID prevented that person from coming into the building to scan those documents, so this is going to actually take a little bit longer. We don't have that person doing that on a part-time basis, and even if we did, they wouldn't be allowed in the building. We wouldn't have them just come in just strictly for that. So we did add it again for next year and increase it slightly because that is what the actual maintenance cost is. Once everything is scanned and done, then that project will be over and those costs will be gone. Are there any questions about the document management system? It looks like then the last item that we have under non-departmental would be the citywide surveillance cameras. And those were moved, they're both $75,000. I'm sorry, they're both $75,000. It's for fiscal year 2022 and fiscal year 2023. That was originally budgeted, and those citywide surveillance cameras, they were actually budgeted for 2021 this year and 2022 next year. They had been pushed out 1 year. So that was the only change there. The dollar amount is the same. It's just been pushed out 1 more year. Are there any other questions about any of these projects that we haven't covered yet? Okay. Jeff, do you want me to go into all the debt service?
Well, if you like.
Okay. I assume we generally do. I can't remember from last year. Okay. So the next section is for the debt service, and this is all of the payments either out of the capital improvement sales tax fund or through the COPS certificates of participation or the general obligation bond debt for all of our capital projects. So the only changes that we have this year, we had budgeted $109,600. It's actually $89,300 for the U.S. Bancorp, excuse me, energy project lease. So those are what the payments are going forward for that. The only other change we have is for the splash at Wabash. We had a budget at $228,100. It's actually $222,809 and then $222,695 for the final payment. And we also did increase the the capital improvement sales tax debt service for the ladder truck that we just purchased last year. We had not actually gotten the truck in yet, and so until we received that final payment, we did not have an amortized schedule of how those costs were going to be going out. This is the new amortized schedule for each year going out. It's a 10-year COPS. So that'll expire in 2029. So that is all the current debt service that we have for the city. The total amount budgeted by fund for this fiscal year is $937,000 for the Parks Fund. We budgeted $822,609 is what we're forecasting for the Certificate of Participation Fund. And the Capital Improvement Sales Tax Fund, we're forecasting $1.2 million. And then general obligation bond, we're budgeting $525,800. We have further breakdowns of how the expenditures are either by debt service or by fund. And it's just a breakdown of that information. One of the key items is we had budgeted $20,000 in total common fleet, with $6,000 being a transfer from parks for that common fleet purchase. Their forecast, there is nothing that is going to be done this fiscal year, so that is zero. We do have common fleet that we're planning on purchasing for the future years, so there is this Parks Fund transfer amount that is budgeted, and that corresponds back to our pro forma, that first page I went over. The next issue we have is, this is where, if you remember in the beginning, I was talking about the EDST, or the Economic Development Sales Tax Fund transfer for the city portion of the STP project. This here is where it was only budgeted at 20,000 or 20%, I'm sorry. And so since it was only forecasted at 20%, that's all that we had budgeted. So we can take more funds from Economic Development Sales Tax Fund. There are funds there to cover those additional portions, which is what brings our fund balance back to a positive number after those transfers. And that will be included in the memo that I send out to council with some diagrams to try to better explain that for better understanding of how that works. The next section that we have goes into all of the grant funds or potential grant funds, and for each fiscal year and how much we anticipate on receiving for the capital improvement. And then this bottom portion here is for grant funds for the Parks Fund. And so all of this correlates back to that very front sheet. So that way we make sure that we have accounted for any grant or any grant funds that we should be able to recoup, to make sure that when we're showing what our fund balance is going to be is as accurate as possible. Are there any questions about anything with the capital improvement, 5-year capital improvement plan? Okay, so if there aren't any, Jeff?
Well, I was just going to say, to wrap up then, as you mentioned, we've got to, we'll get some information out regarding the pro forma in terms of an explanation of that. We'll take a look at moving the parks, the AV upgrade up forward from where it is right now. We'll continue to work on the barrier question, as well as the salt shed. And then we'll fix the common fleet row items.
You're a quick learner, Jeffrey Bloom.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, but that will still leave us with a situation where we still are spending well above what we're actually bringing in every year. And that still needs to be addressed.
And you looked at that, didn't you, Lexi, in terms of a solution?
I have. It's really hard because we have a lot of items that we really can't cut. We really can't cut police vehicles or body cameras. We can't, you know, those are essential equipment for our police officers. We can't cut turnout gear and some of those, you know, walkie-talkies and things like that for the fire department. That's essential gear for our fire department. And it's not a popular thing, and so please don't shoot the messenger. But the only thing I can see that we can cut that is not going to really cause severe problems for our staff to be able to do their jobs is the street replacement for the next several years. And it would be, my recommendation would be to, as much as we don't want to cut the $300,000 from fiscal year 2022. And then we would reduce what we spend in 2023, 2024, 2025, and 2026. But if we do that, we would wind up with an actual positive balance going forward. And we would actually wind up with, if we cut it, as I had anticipated, by, and only spend, cut it by $300,000 here in fiscal 2022, by $270,000 in fiscal 22. Fiscal 23, cut it by 270,000, then by 125,000, that you actually wind up, that will wind up with a positive balance going into our fund balance most years, anywhere from about 69,000 to as low as 4,000. And then there's a couple years that we might dip in by like 2,000 or 7,000 into our capital improvement sales tax fund. But we'll try to still do as much as we can each year in streets while still maintaining a positive net change in fund balance every year.
So is that cutting the projects we already talked about, the Dade project, the fluorescent project? Are you talking about? No, that's, those projects still stay in place.
Yes, Dan, because those are all grant funded. We don't want to cut anything that's grant funded because we can get most of that paid by somebody else. So that's why we don't want to cut any of those. Unfortunately, what it is
yeah. No, I just wanted to hear you say that because for the people listening, I wanted to clarify that.
Okay. So what what I was referring to was the amount of money that the city adds on top of those specific street projects, as like this is more street replacement, slab replacement. It's in areas where we actually need more than just patching, where we need actual sections of road replaced that don't qualify under the low mod for CDBG and are not part of the Florissant Road, Frost Road, or Dade Avenue projects. And so it would be like this year, we aren't spending any money on that or sidewalks this year. And it would be to do that for the following years and to make it so we have at least, if not a positive change in net fund balance, at least a neutral, no change in net fund balance, net change in fund balance. I'd take that as well. But we really need to get back to positive, and then we need to either not take anything out of it or increase our fund balance every year going forward, at least a little bit.
Lexi?
Because something big is going to happen.
Lexi?
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
Did I hear you correctly? You said in 2022 for the street replacement, you taking out $300,000 and just leaving that 155 from the CDBG?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any reason why you couldn't take half of that?
Well, the reason why is if we take out that if we take out all of it, we would end up that at the end of fiscal 22 with a positive fund balance of about $69,000.
In other words,
So I
if
guess
we only took out half, we would still be in the red. We would still have a deficit in our fund balance.
So I guess we could maybe spend $50,000 on streets. I don't know what that would get us, but we could spend $50,000 on streets, and then we would still have a positive fund balance of $19,000. So it would at least be positive, but I don't know that 50,000 is really good. I'd rather use that 50,000 the next year.
Yeah, we also recognize we have a statutory responsibility to maintain a balanced budget, and there's two different ways to look at that. It's completely balanced, or you can use reserves to offset an operating deficit. The problem is we don't have any reserves.
Right.
So what I'm trying to do is get us to where we have at least a little bit of a reserve.
Yeah.
Okay, what are you going to do in case of emergency? Something goes wrong with the streets that need repairs now. Some of the slabs have totally deteriorated and they don't qualify for the CDBG. So if you have a slab that has totally deteriorated, are you going to patch it? It's going to cost money to patch it. So
that's where we need those grants.
And to recognize we also have dollars available for repairs and maintenance in the general fund. It's not a lot. I want to say it's probably about $30,000 or $40,000.
Yes.
So we can use then, and a slab generally runs anywhere from 15, depending upon where it is and what you have to do. If you have to re-rock the base or put new rock in the base, it could cost you more. Otherwise, it's somewhere between $1,500 and $2,500 per slab.
Guess we need a task force.
That
a task force? I'm confused. What
that's
you mean?
being sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm talking about brain power, trying to figure out ways to handle the streets concerns because we don't have the money, or we need to figure out ways to bring in money.
Or we kind of figure out a way within this CIP that we rearrange some stuff, and so that we can have enough to at least have half in the in a
Did you
balance,
not
because
hear
I
what they
do feel like because I do feel like I'm sorry, and I don't even know why I do feel like we do need to have something there for some kind of services, because you never know what happens. I mean, everybody's concerned about breaking in. We do have an obligation. So I would just say, because you never know what's going to happen, you need to have something in there. And like Jeffrey just said, what is it, $30,000 to $40,000 is not a lot when we already know that we have old roads, we have old areas that, you know, we just can't fix like that, like what we would really need to do.
That is absolutely correct, Councilwoman. We don't have the funds to do what we need to do. And I know that one of the questions that was brought up or comments that was made during the town hall was regarding the roads in Delwood. And I know that they said that Delwood's roads were great, and why don't we have those kinds of roads? And so kind of doing a little bit of research to find out how Delwood got their roads was they did a $7 million general obligation bond. They have 5,000 residents, and they did a $7 million general obligation bond to repave all their roads. So if you correlate their city size of 5,000 residents to our city size of about 20,000 residents, it would, basic estimate would be about 4 times that amount. So we would need something like a $28 million general obligation bond in order to be able to pave all of our roads at one time like Delwood did, and to have those beautiful roads that Delwood has.
We're just
our
talking
residents
about a year. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I apologize.
No, you're fine. Our residents have, you know, have made it clear that over several different other taxes and tax increase requests that we've had, that they have reached their limit on taxing, and that is what it is. So we don't have the funds to make our streets look like Delwood as much as we'd like to, and I think everybody here would love to have beautiful streets. We don't have the funds, so the only thing we can do is hopefully get some other grant funding or other funds for streets other than the CDBG and the STP programs that we're already doing. Because we know that going out for a general obligation or a tax increase is not a likely option. But we do have to balance our budget. So there isn't really anything else that we can cut, because almost everything else is going to be grant funded, and we don't want to cut something that's grant funded, because I as a finance person, I hate to throw away money if someone's going to give it to me. I really try to make those things happen. So hopefully maybe we can find some other grants, and maybe between now and the end of this fiscal year, we'll find grants to be able to put money in for 2022. I don't know that, but maybe that's something we can really make as a priority for this fiscal year. But we just don't have the funds to do it as much as I'd like to, or anybody else would. I mean, if y'all don't like my recommendation, which I don't blame you if you don't, because I'm sure a lot of people don't, I'm willing to take suggestions. I'm having a really hard time finding anything that I can cut that's going to make that difference. Because if I cut $20,000 out of one division, that's $20,000, and we could be here for days cutting $5,000 or $10,000 out of each line item, trying to come up with $300,000.
And even if we budget here today through cuts, we're still only doing a Band-Aid solution where we're not self-sustaining going forward as cost goes up for infrastructure maintenance, and as unforeseen circumstances tend to happen over a lifetime. Like, even if we cut now, we're still only balancing for the next 3 or 4 years. So that there needs to be further discussions beyond just balancing this, but how we are increasing overall revenue streams, that we don't keep running into this problem. Because as we cut things now, because we have to, we will have to continue to keep doing that unless we find other revenue streams going forward into past this plan here.
You're correct, sir.
Absolutely.
I agree, Stephen.
So maybe just like, if we budget now for this year, how are we going forward with conversations or planning to increase these revenue streams or finding alternatives or more just in general? Like, I think we can all swallow a $300,000 cut to roads for 1 or 2 years if there's being plans for stopping the hemorrhaging, because that's what we're experiencing, and we need to address that.
At the very least, I most definitely agree.
Well, let's do this for the purposes of creating a 5-year CIP, which is our charter-based requirement that we're facing at this moment in time, and with the goal of creating one that has a balanced budget for the time being. Let's move forward with Lexi's recommendation, and then recognize that we're going to have to deal with this issue both in the near term and certainly before our next budget round.
Absolutely.
Anybody object to that as an approach?
So what I would ask, or Lexi, I know you're gathering all these materials together that you're going to be sending us tomorrow. So can you include this, you know, in the paperwork or in the memo? And I guess I guess it's probably a conversation I can have with you one-on-one, or any of us can, but, or even the citizens can for that matter. But I'm just trying to figure out where are some other areas, if there are any other, and I'm not seeing them, but you know, I'm trying to look as hard as you are, and I don't even have the knowledge you have. So
yeah, I would be happy to sit down with anybody, any of you all, and discuss any of this with you. What I will do is I will prepare I've already done the memo explaining the difference in the fund balance beginning and how it's going to change. And I have how that plays out already done. What I will do is I will send an updated version of the CIP, including the 2 lines that were not there and taking up the extra vehicle that was there inadvertently. And then I can also send you a revised version that would show us, if we cut out those streets, what that would look like for our fund balance going forward. And then when we say, and I just, for clarification purposes, because I want to make sure I'm doing it the way the council is looking for it, when we say that we're going to hold off on that flood barrier or pause on that flood barrier, we're still budgeting that amount, just not moving on it. Is that correct? As well as the police department, I believe we changed the word to barrier. We're budgeting it but holding off, and are just not spending it, or do you want me to take that out of the budget?
I didn't hear anybody.
We need to leave it in.
Wait, okay. What are we leaving in? What are we leaving in?
The flood barrier, or the flood mitigation, as well as the police department barrier.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't hear anybody suggest that at all.
Yeah.
Do you want me to take it out?
No, we're looking for additional recommendations.
Yep.
No, we're not taking it out of the CIP plan. We're not moving forward.
Wait, when did this get introduced to the CIP plan?
Oh my God, it was in the conversation. We talked about the salt. We talked about the
talking about the salt. I'm not talking about the salt.
Yes, we are. We're talking about the salt barrier and the floodplain, and then we're also talking about the barrier around the police department. And we talked about the fact that we wanted Chief Armstrong and some others to come back with other ideas, but we didn't take it out of the CIP. We asked for it to be recreated.
Wait, so I am not talking about the salt and all of that. I'm talking specifically about the monies that were just put into a CIP, that were just introduced to the CIP for a suggestion for fence / barrier, whatever you want to call it, that was just put into the CIP. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm referencing to. I'm not clumping it. So let me be clear so you can understand, because
I'm very clear. I understand.
You assumed, no, you're not, because you assumed that I meant, no, you're not, because you assumed, no, you're not, because no, you're not, because you assumed.
Please.
I know. I was trying to finish my sentence, but it was very hard to. You assumed that I was clumping everything in all together, and I was not. I was talking about the specific thing that each one of us, minus who is that did not get to speak. It was one council person, which was the chief's suggestion about a fence or barrier. That's what I was speaking in reference to. And so I'm not including all of the salt truck. I'm not including all of that. And so you just went on a whole little thing about.
No, I didn't.
I didn't even, that's not what
Linda, let her get finished, please.
Just call me Trump. Jeez.
Linda, you must be tired, because I don't even refer to you that way. I don't know where this is coming from. You might need to take a nap.
Dang.
But I don't recall us saying that we wanted this in the budget. Was there ever something?
Wait a minute. Everybody, hold on for a second. Let's review the process.
Mm-hmm.
Because the process of the CIP, it is my responsibility to create this capital improvement project process, and to review all of the capital needs of the city, and then to render those into this document. As we then proceed through this document in our review, then it is the responsibility of council to say either yes or no to those items. And so if it is here and I've not heard a no that says, no, take it out of the CIP, then it is going to remain in the CIP. That doesn't mean we're going to spend it.
Right.
It means that it's in the CIP as a planning device. And when we have a final solution, or what we believe is a final solution, we will bring that forward to council. And it is at that moment in time that council can choose to accept or reject that solution. And we will have had it in the plan, so we know what the budgetary impact is and what the impact on the fund balance is.
Right. Jeffrey, I actually agree with everything that you just said. That is the purpose. And from my understanding, just by listening to each and every council during a CIP discussion, what I heard was that was something that I did not want to fence. I do not want to, so what I'm asking is, while each one of the council people had a discussion during a CIP meeting, against the idea of having a fence / barrier, whatever the name of it was, minus Tony Burrows. I believe Miss Tony did say that she was interested in looking for more data and things of that nature. And so that's why I'm asking, why is that amount? Because we just took out how much money for streets? We just took out how much money for streets, and we're talking about a plan, and this is in the CIP. We're talking about a plan here, regardless if it's 5 years or not. We are planning how we're going to create, certain projects within the next 5 years. That's what we're doing right now. So that's what I'm asking for. I'm asking because this is an instance where something was introduced, and I listened to everybody and during the CIP discussion, and that's what I was coming to the conclusion of. I just want to know at what point, if that needs to be clarified, then please, by all means, do.
So Fran, I wasn't proposing to take it out of the CIP plan. What we agreed on and what I thought Linda and Tony and I all agreed with Chief Armstrong was that we need to make sure that our police officers are protected. The building wasn't nearly as important as our officers, and so instead of putting an 8.5-foot fence up around all of the police department, what are the other options? And we'll leave that as a bookmark in our CIP plan to see what they come back with. And I think that the same thing was true for the SALT. I was switching phones, and so I didn't hear, my apologies, all of the SALT discussion, but I believe that that's the same thing. So not to take it out of the budget or not to take it out of the CIP plan, but just to come back with other options.
I appreciate, thank you, Heather, for explaining your position. So my question is, whose decision was it to take the money out of the streets? Like, at what point, like, where do we find that balance? You know,
So Fran, the thing about it is, this is not a budget discussion. This is not actual money. I mean, in the sense of a budget, in comparison to a budget. This is simply a listing by department of what they need to do their business. And then we have to look at their needs and compare it to what our income and outgoing monies are. And then we have to decide, how do we turn this into an actual budget? And so it's a 5-year plan. So, you know, nobody's taken the money out of the streets. That's a proposal. She made a proposal. Now, in the reality of the budget, if you really want to balance the budget, which we have a fiduciary responsibility to have a balanced budget for our citizens, then we have to look at the proposals that our finance director offers us. And if one of those proposals happens to be the very uncomfortable one of not doing street repairs, and that's the one that is going to get us to the black, then that is when it becomes real money. Right now, it's in the discussion process. So I hear you getting confused with that, and I don't want you to be confused with that, because it will muck you up when we get to the point when we do have the discussion. Right now, this money is not being taken out or put in or whatever. These are all proposals. These are all analytical options to create the realistic budget that has a realistic timeline on it, that has a fiduciary responsibility to the community. So in that regard, it becomes real money. Tonight it is a proposed conversation, and it is a hopeful list of things that each department wants to get to do the job the best they can do it. And we have to make hard decisions in this analytical discussion tonight. That's all it is tonight.
I definitely agree with that, which is,
well, I'm glad you agree.
Actually,
thank you.
You just explained everything. I mean, regardless if we're talking about 5 years or the budget, I mean, it's what I'm stating, it still remains the same. It still remains the same. And it kind of touches on like what Stephen was talking about in terms of at what point do we, yes, everything you just said, Linda, I get it. You know, you've got to balance the budget. You also have to balance this CIP. I get all of that. But I think what your frustration is coming from is because we're working on a CIP with, yes, like you said, within the budget, you can allocate, but we're talking about 5 years. We're talking about, I just want to be clear. So Jeffrey, was it you that made the decision to take out the amount of money that we normally have within the CIP? And
the money has taken out.
So Fran,
within the CIP, I'm talking about within the CIP.
Fran, so what you see in 2022, 2023, and so on, those come into play when we have the actual budget sessions for those fiscal years. So if something got moved to another, got moved to 2023, when that fiscal year budget comes under discussion with council, if there's something in the CIP that council says that we need to drop the priority of that, that's when council makes the decision to defund or reallocate or, you know, move the money to something that is more important at that time. So it's, you know, like what we're talking about here is just what was approved for the CIP in the budget session. And Jeffrey or Lexi, I'm, you know, you guys can speak circles around the budgetary process more than me, but I'm just trying to simplify. This is very confusing, and it is very, and I'm not trying to dumb it down at all, Fran. I mean no disrespect whatsoever. I'm just trying to lay out that it wasn't necessarily someone decided to pull the money out. It's what council allocated, and then for that fiscal year, correct?
And I guess maybe I'm saying it wrong. So when I say pull out, I am meaning reallocate. And my point that I'm making is the fact that we have chosen to insert something new into this CIP, which was not originally proposed. And what I'm also looking at is what we have had to take it out as a result and or reallocate to a different area because of, you know, the fact that we're trying to, you know, shuffle some things around. That's what I'm talking about. And I'm talking about the community knowing, and then us knowing that we have things that are going to come up, and there's hard to anticipate 5 years out, you know, and we have to do what we have to do. But this is just as our budget is to look at and reallocate the funds within the following year. It's the same thing with the CIP. It's just a 5 year in advance. And so I think it's okay to have those type of conversations, especially if the purpose of us sitting here is to kind of figure those things out, you know?
Okay, so for clarity for moving forward on what I'm going to send out to the council, shall I leave the floodproof and the police department barrier in, or should I take one and or both of them out to come up with a balanced presentation of the CIP for you all to review?
You know what, at this point, do two versions, but I was referring my inclination, and I think everybody else, our thoughts were that it was going to include both. But I mean, heck, at this point, I don't know, make a couple recipes.
Let me say this. Since we did talk about the fence and the flood information about the salt, we need to come to a consensus that we had a discussion, but no one decided to delete it from the CIP. It was only in the midst of a discussion. Can we agree on that?
Sure.
I can agree that it was my understanding that we had the ability to approve the proposed CIP according to the way in which we agreed to do it. And so I do want my voice to be heard. Just in terms of just me speaking personally, I feel like the cost of putting in a fence or barrier should not be in this CIP, just for the reasons that I spoke of, because we have had to take out and reallocate some funds that were originally purposed for the community. And so that would be just my personal thing. And then I can agree with everything else.
So Mayor Jones, do we need to take a straw man poll? Do we need to take a vote?
Just a consensus, everyone, to agree that we talked about these two items and Chief Armstrong is going to come back with some alternatives. So let's agree to just keep it there and wait till he come back. Nothing is being moved. In that $300,000 for streets repair, Lexi made a suggestion where that would be the place to remove something if needed, but it's not any dollars right now. It's just a suggestion. So can we agree that that was a suggestion and get consensus on it so we could move forward? And if we have to come back and visit it, then we will. But at this point, let's just agree to let the items be there until later.
I completely concur.
Yeah, there's no problem. Hasn't changed anything on my end.
And Fran, we did hear you. We did hear you, but we
That's
have
all.
consensus.
Because when we say consensus, that means everybody agrees. And I didn't agree with it, but okay.
You okay?
I'm fine. Let's move forward.
Okay. Lexi, you have anything else?
No, I will just get everything prepared, and then, as you all have said, this is just something that's going to be out there and proposed. It will not be discussed again until the budget, when we do the budget later on this year, well, actually this fiscal year, next calendar year in June is when when all of these numbers actually become finalized numbers. So I will get this all out.
So I have a question right there on that statement that you said it would not be discussed again until the, that is where I have a concern, and it may fall into line with Fran's, and I would like to address the mayor on it too. The timeline, which is one of the things that I was asking Jeffrey Bloom about quite a bit, the timeline of getting the plans together for the salt shed and so forth. That's probably, from what I'm hearing, from what Elliot needs and what Jeffrey can provide, sounds to me like that's going to be March, April, somewhere in there. He did say May, but I'd like to see it done sooner than May. But those things being done would then create a need for a conversation prior to budget, correct?
True.
So I would not want to see that phrasing. I don't want that mentality to get stuck in our heads. Maybe everything in the norm doesn't get discussed until to the next budget session, but this particular project and possibly the other information we're asking Jason Armstrong to pull together for us to look at would create a conversation necessary prior to budget.
That's correct. I guess I should have made myself clear.
Well,
These will not be adopted. This CIP will not be adopted by the council until June. Okay. Now, the items that you all have that you want to revisit for discussion, like some sort of a police department barrier, you have said that you weren't going to take that out of this proposed CIP, but you have not approved the expenditure. And so that is something, whenever that expenditure is ready to go forward, it would come before council to discuss, because you have not specifically approved that expenditure. You need more information. Same with the flood-proofing barrier for the salt shed, because we needed more information and that price might go up. That would come before council as well. So when I said that the discussion on this, or when it becomes official, is this will be a resolution that we do when we do the budget, and that's when these numbers become more actual numbers. But the items that you have discussed, like the police department fence or barrier and the flood proofing, those are items that are not approved for expenditure at this point. They are just items, at this point, they're placeholders. They are items that you have specifically requested more information before approval for either one of those. That was my understanding. If correct, Jeff?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So Fran brought up the point that we didn't have consensus. So I would like to take a vote as to the flood, I can't see, the flood proofing a barrier for salt shed, the police department fence, even though we asked for more information and Jeff is gonna do something between May or April, can we take a vote that this will stay into the CIP until we get to the point that we need to discuss it further?
Mayor Jones, since Tony Burrow's not here, I would say maybe not so much a vote, but maybe on the record that Fran is not on consensus, so that she does get acknowledged, because it's not a, yeah.
We have a quorum. Fran here, I'm here, you here. Heather, is Steve here? Steven?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry.
Okay, so we do
Yeah,
have
so we still
enough
have
to
a
take
quorum,
a vote.
yes.
We do have enough to take a vote.
But I
So,
didn't think it was a voting situation. This was a CIP is an informational situation. So, I mean, wouldn't it just, or like what
Linda,
said?
this is just to get consensus. I don't think this is out of line.
Well,
so
I'm thinking more like a straw vote.
all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
I oppose.
So the ayes have it.
For the record, I need to be clear on what you all are voting.
It seemed to be questions about the flood proofing barrier for the salt shed and the police department fence. And they are in the CIP. And earlier Lexi mentioned why things are in light blue. And now we're at the point where we need to be clear that we asked for more information to come back on the police fence, not fence, we're gonna call it barrier, and the flood shed. Jeff is gonna come back with additional information. These items need to remain in the CIP. That's what we were voting on.
So that's for the police barrier and the salt shed.
Yes.
Funds are remaining intact.
Yes. They are remaining, those items, item number 130 and 131 will remain in the CIP.
Okay.
Mayor Jones?
Yes, ma'am.
I hate to be difficult, but I have to ask the question, and you can tell me yes or no. Is it possible to have two votes, one on the salt shed and one on the police?
No, because I put both of them together, and then that would make me have to go back and rescind what we just did. And we had ayes that favor, so there's no need to retake the vote.
Okay.
Anything else, Miss Lexi?
No, ma'am, I have nothing else.
Anything else, Jeff?
No, ma'am.
Okay. I would like to entertain a motion and a second to adjourn.
So move.
So moved by whom?
Byron.
Byron.
Councilman Fry.
Okay, and second?
Second.
By Stephen. It has been properly moved and second. Are you ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. The meeting is adjourned. Have a great night.
Thank you, Lexi and Jeffrey, and thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Welcome. Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Adios.
Good night. Thank you.
Lexi, I need you to cut your screen off. Thank you.
Yeah, get off this thing. Hey.